Hello, friends, and welcome back to a quiet corner of science, where curiosity moves slowly, thoughts drift like deep water currents, and the universe feels soft enough to fall asleep inside. Whether you're listening wrapped in a blanket, lying in the warm glow of a bedside lamp, or resting somewhere between waking and dreaming, you're already in the perfect place. Tonight, we're going to the bottom of the world, into a realm so untouched, so cold, and so impossibly remote that it feels like stepping outside the boundaries of Earth itself. Antarctica. But not the Antarctica we see in postcards' icy mountains, enormous glaciers, wind-carving white deserts. No, we are going somewhere stranger, deeper, quieter. We are slipping beneath the plate of sea ice into waters that have remained almost unchanged for millions of years. Waters so cold they hover just above freezing, yet so rich with life that they defy the boundaries of biology. Down here, creatures do something extraordinary. They grow, not just a little, but into shapes and sizes that look impossible. Sea spiders as wide as dinner plates drift like pale shadows across the seafloor. Amphipods tiny in most oceans. Barely grains of living punctuation become large enough to fill a human palm. Ribbon worms stretch longer than a person's arm, folding across the sand like threads of living silk. Jellyfish grow bells so wide and tentacles so long that their ends disappear into the blue, fading almost into myth. These are not relics of the past or extinct curiosities. They are alive right now, moving slowly through a world colder, more stable, and more isolated than any other on Earth. For scientists, for divers, for anyone who witnesses this underwater realm up close, the question is unavoidable. Why here? Why does the coldest place on Earth produce giants? This has puzzled researchers for decades. The Southern Ocean breaks the rules, the very rules biologists have used to understand life everywhere else. And yet, what we see here is not an exception. It is a pattern, a repeating signature across species that otherwise look unrelated. Sea spiders, amphipods, jellyfish, worms, starfish. Creatures that should remain small don't. Something about this frozen world encourages life to stretch. But the explanation isn't simple. There is no single switch that gets flipped when water becomes cold. Instead, it's an interlocking puzzle, a slow-moving architecture built over tens of millions of years. And tonight, piece by piece, we are going to unravel that puzzle together. Before we drift deeper, though, I want you to take a moment, let your shoulders soften. Let the breath ease out of you like fog rising from a winter lake. This is a long journey, not a hurried one. The Antarctic doesn't rush, neither should we. Now, imagine standing at the world's edge. The air is sharp, crystalline. The sky feels larger than anywhere else you've been. Beneath your feet lies a continent sealed beneath ice, thicker than the height of skyscrapers. But beneath that, beyond the cracks and fractures and blue-white shadows, there is an ocean waiting. If you were to lower yourself into that ocean past the first shock of cold, past the dimming of sunlight, you would reach a world shaped by stillness. A world where evolution has moved at the slowest possible pace and has had the patience to try things nowhere else can sustain. For a long stretch of Earth's history, Antarctica was nothing like this. It was warm, forested, alive with dinosaurs, ancient reptiles, towering southern forests. But continents wander. They shift like slow tectonic rafts, moving centimeter by centimeter across the planet. Over millions of years, Antarctica drifted toward the pole. It pulled away from South America and Australia, and as it did, something extraordinary happened. Something that would change the history of life itself. Two ocean gateways opened, narrow at first, then widening. Water began to flow between Antarctica and the surrounding world, softly, slowly. And then, one day, geologically speaking, the flow circled the entire continent, no land in the way, nothing to block it. A current began, silent at the surface, but unimaginably powerful below. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the largest and strongest on Earth. Imagine a river, not of water, but of cold, a river that circles the planet's bottom like a liquid wall. Once this current formed, warm water from the north could no longer reach the continent. Antarctica was sealed off. It entered a kind of climatic solitude. The land froze, the ice grew thicker, seasons sharpened into long cycles of darkness and pale light. And in the ocean, something unusual began. The waters surrounding Antarctica became stable, so stable that year after year, century after century, the temperature barely wavered. While other oceans warmed and cooled through ice ages and interglacial periods, the Southern Ocean stayed locked in its deep chill. There were no sudden heat waves, no tropical invasions, no rapid changes in predators or competitors. The ecosystem became almost timeless, a biological world gently sealed from the rest of Earth. Isolation, stability, cold, the three pillars of a quiet evolutionary experiment. Here, species did not need to rush. They did not need to compete against newcomers. They adapted slowly, patiently. Metabolisms sank into rhythms matching the icy stillness. Lifespans stretched. Entire lineages settled into patterns that remained unbroken for millions of years. The result? Creatures we would never have predicted. Here, a sea spider with legs longer than your hands can thrive. Here, amphipods can grow to the size of small birds' eggs. Here, jellyfish build bodies of such fragile beauty that in any other ocean they would be torn apart within hours. And every time scientists send submersibles or divers beneath the ice, they return with the same impression. This place follows rules we are only beginning to understand. But that is the journey we begin tonight. There is no single answer to the mystery of Antarctic giants. Instead, there is a story, a long one, that we will explore part by part, a story involving drifting continents, massive currents, oxygen-rich waters, the physics of cold, the absence of predators, deep-time climate cycles, and the strange patience of life in a world where nothing moves quickly. And so, with a steady breath and a quiet mind, we take our first step into the frozen blue. Before Antarctica became a kingdom of ice, a place where wind scrapes across white plains and the ocean breathes in slow, frozen rhythms, it was something else entirely, something warmer, softer, almost unrecognizable. Tonight, we peel back the ice like layers of memory and return to a chapter of Earth's story long before anything here resembled the world we see today. A time when Antarctica was not a blank white silence, but a land of living forests, flowing rivers, and creatures that wandered freely beneath a gentle southern sun. It is difficult to imagine, especially when modern Antarctica feels so brutally cold that even summer can freeze your eyelashes. But if we drift far enough back 70, 80, 100 million years, we arrive at a continent still stitched into the supercontinent Gondwana, a sprawling green landmass it shared with South America, Africa, India, and Australia. On this ancient Earth, Antarctica sat much farther north than it does now. Its climate was mild, moist, almost temperate. Fossils found beneath the ice reveal a world that feels like fiction. Tree ferns rising like green chandeliers, conifer forests shading the ground, flowering plants rooting deep into riverbanks. Some nights, paleobotanists describe these ancient environments so vividly that you can almost hear leaves rattling in a warm southern wind, something nobody has felt on this continent for millions of years. But the forests were only the beginning. Dinosaurs walked here, large, lumbering herbivores, fast, feathered predators, birds with teeth, reptiles that swam through inland seas. The Antarctic landscape looked nothing like the frozen desert we know. Instead, it pulsed with a prehistoric heartbeat, full of life that lived and died long before the first ice ever formed. And yet, even in this lush age, something was already shifting. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ground beneath these forests began to move. Continents drift. They always have. Plate tectonics is slow enough that no single lifetime can sense its progress, but long enough time turns centimeters into oceans. Gondwana began to fragment, its pieces drifting apart like slow-moving puzzle pieces being carried across the table of the planet. Africa moved away first. Then India. Australia began pulling northward. South America leaned west. And Antarctica, once central, once connected, found itself slowly sliding toward the pole, toward the cold, toward isolation. Millions of years passed. Rivers shifted. Forests adapted. Winds cooled. The continent, once alive with color, started to feel the first hints of a coming transformation. But the moment that changed everything, the moment that wrote the next chapter of Earth's climate, did not happen on land. It happened in the ocean. As Antarctica continued its silent drift, it created two narrow passages of water where once there had been solid Earth. One separated it from South America, the other from Australia. Today, these passages are known as the Drake Passage and the Tasman Gateway. At first, the openings were small, and water trickled through like a faint breath. But as millions of years slid by, the openings widened, the trickle deepened, and then something extraordinary happened, something that would echo through Earth's climate forever. The water began to flow all the way around Antarctica. It did not have to stop at a coastline. It did not have to bend around land. It could complete a continuous circle, cutting across the cold, open ocean without interruption. Slowly, this circular flow strengthened, then strengthened again and again, until finally it became one of the most powerful forces on Earth, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the ACC. Imagine a river so massive it carries more water than all other rivers on Earth combined. Imagine a current so strong it circles the planet at its bottom, unstoppable, wrapping Antarctica in a moving ring of cold water. Once this current formed, warm water from the rest of the world could no longer reach the continent. Antarctica was sealed behind a liquid fortress, a thermal barrier that isolated it from the global climate. Warmth could not enter. Heat could not stay. Ice began to grow, not suddenly, not dramatically, but year after year, century after century, until forests fell silent beneath blankets of cold. Plants died, rivers slowed, the ancient animals vanished, and the continent slowly became the frozen world we know. What makes this moment so astonishing is not just the transformation of land to ice, but the ripple effect it caused across the Southern Ocean. The ACC didn't merely cool the climate, it created one of the most stable, isolated marine environments on the planet. Once this circular current locked into place, species stopped migrating in and out. Warm water predators could no longer enter. Environmental disturbances from the rest of the world were muted. Temperatures beneath the ice became incredibly stable, and it's within this sealed, stable world that the seeds of Antarctic gigantism were planted. The creatures that lived here were no longer part of the global ecosystem. They were part of something smaller, something quieter, something that evolved not through competition or chaos, but through patience. In a sense, the Antarctic became a biological time capsule, a laboratory created by nature, where evolution had time to experiment with size, physiology, and endurance in ways that would be impossible anywhere else. And so, while the land froze, the ocean transformed into a world shaped not by destruction, but by an unexpected kind of peace. No new predators, no sudden climatic shifts, no catastrophic invasions from warmer seas, only stillness and stability. And the cold, conditions under which life slowly, gradually, almost invisibly began to stretch. Not every species survived this transition. Many vanished forever, but those that remained found themselves in an environment unlike any other on Earth, a place where the rules of biology would begin to bend in gentle, curious ways. This is the quiet beginning of the story of the Antarctic giants. A story not of violence or competition, but of transformation. A story born from the slow drift of continents and the invisible strength of the currents that circle them. A story carved not by chaos, but by the calmest force nature ever created, a world sealed in cold. Once Antarctica drifted fully into the southern polar circle, the stage was set for one of the most dramatic oceanic transformations in Earth's history. It is a moment that did not happen overnight. There was no sudden roar, no eruption, no catastrophe. Instead, it unfolded in slow motion, so slowly that even the drifting continents, moving only centimeters a year, seemed impatient by comparison. And yet, this slow event changed everything. Water began to move, not just because wind pushed it, or because tides churned it, but because the planet's geometry had shifted in exactly the right way. Two gateways, so narrow at first they were little more than cracks allowed small spirals of water to slip through, one between Antarctica and South America, one between Antarctica and Australia. Over millions of years, those cracks widened, and the spirals of water grew. It is difficult to appreciate how subtle this change was at first. Imagine a shallow breath between two rocks. Then imagine that breath deepening, becoming steady, then gaining strength until it becomes a wind, and then a gale. That is what happened to the ocean surrounding Antarctica. A trickle grew into a corridor grew into a channel, and then, with the patience only geologic time possesses, the channels grew into something no ocean on Earth had ever seen before. A ring, a circular pathway of water with no interruptions, no land bridge, no shallow coastlines forcing the flow to stop or bend. For the first time, the ocean found a way to travel around a continent continuously. And so, the water took the opportunity. Current became alignment. Alignment became momentum. Momentum became something extraordinary. This new oceanic river wrapped itself around Antarctica like a liquid fortress. It grew faster, stronger, colder, and eventually it became the single most powerful current on the planet. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the ACC. The ACC is not just another current. It is the planetary equivalent of a heartbeat, immense, constant, and capable of influencing climate thousands of kilometers away. Today, it carries more than 140 million cubic meters of water per second, enough to refill all the world's rivers in less than a minute. But when it first formed, it was the beginning of something even bigger than a flow of water. It was the beginning of isolation. Before the ACC, Antarctica was part of a global oceanic conversation. Warm waters drifted south, cold waters drifted north. Animals migrated, ecosystems mixed, heat flowed, life exchanged. After the ACC formed, that conversation stopped. Warm waters from the tropics reached the edge of the current the same way a traveler reaches a locked gate. The current pushed them back. Heat was deflected. Nutrients traveled along the boundary instead of crossing it. Life from other oceans drifted close but could not enter. Antarctica had been cut off. This is the moment the continent's fate was sealed, not by ice falling from the sky, not by storms, not by sudden catastrophe, but by a quiet, powerful river that encircled it endlessly. Once this current fully established itself, Antarctica entered a purely southern climate, its own isolated cold chamber. Within a few million years, this change triggered one of the most profound cooling events in Earth's history. Glaciers took root, ice sheets expanded, snow no longer melted during the summers, ancient forests died, rivers froze, the continent, slowly but relentlessly, sank into a deep freeze that has lasted for over 30 million years. But what happened in the ocean is perhaps even more mysterious and more important. The ACC did not simply cool the water. It created a world with dramatically different ecological rules. The ocean surrounding Antarctica stopped being a place of constant change. Instead, it became stable across millions of years, cold almost beyond comparison, oxygen-rich in every layer, protected from warm water predators, quiet, sheltered by ice, slow-paced, with metabolism and life cycles stretched across decades. This total stability is extremely rare on Earth. Most ecosystems change rapidly. Temperatures swing, species come and go, new predators appear, ocean currents reverse, storms reshape coastlines. But in the Southern Ocean, the rhythm is so slow and so steady that evolution has time to wander down paths that would be immediately cut short elsewhere. It is here, in this stability, that gigantism took root. The creatures of Antarctica did not become giants because the environment pushed them to grow. They grew because the environment never pushed them to stop. There were no new predators arriving every 1,000 years. No invasive species arriving on drifting debris, no warm water animals rushing in, no sudden heat waves that would crash their metabolism. It was a world where the slow could thrive. Imagine evolution as a painter. In most places, the painter is forced to work quickly. Storms come, climates shift, predators rise and fall. But in Antarctica, evolution was given a quiet studio, perfect lighting, and millions of years of uninterrupted time. What emerged from that studio were creatures shaped not by chaos, but by patience. This liquid wall, the ACC, created one of Earth's most extraordinary evolutionary laboratories. Inside its boundaries, species drifted into directions that would be impossible anywhere else. Amphipods grew bigger. Sea spiders grew longer. Worms elongated. Jellyfish expanded their tentacles across growing circles of deep blue. Starfish and sponges developed lifespans measured not in years, but decades or even centuries. Nothing in this cold ecosystem rushed because nothing here needed to rush. Even today, divers describe the underwater world beneath Antarctica as dreamlike shapes moving slowly, drifting like thoughts. Creatures unhurried, landscapes unchanged, time itself seems to move differently here. All of this, every strange creature, every oversized limb, every fragile jellyfish tentacle trailing into darkness exists because of a current that never stops circling the continent. A current born from tectonic drift and carved by millions of years of patience. A current that locked Antarctica into a destiny no other place on Earth shares. And now, as we move forward, we leave the world of drifting continents and rising currents behind and begin to step into the new world they created. A sealed, icy laboratory where life rewrote the rules. In the next part, we explore how this isolation set the stage for an evolutionary story unlike anything else on the planet. Once the Antarctic circumpolar current wrapped itself around the continent, something subtle yet profound began to happen. Antarctica didn't simply cool, it detached. Like a drifting dream, it separated not only from land masses, but from the rest of the living world itself. Strange as it sounds, isolation can be creative. And here, in the farthest corner of the planet, isolation became the quiet architect of everything that would follow. The slow rhythms, the long lives, the oversized shapes, the creatures that seem like echoes from another timeline. To understand what happened next, imagine the rest of the world's oceans as a bustling city. Species migrate, competitors arrive, predators evolve, new lineages appear. Life is in constant debate, with itself adapting, adjusting, reshaping. It is noisy, busy, full of change. Now imagine stepping out of that city and into a silent monastery hidden deep in the mountains. No visitors, no disturbances, no interruptions. Time slows, patterns emerge, fragile things can survive. Ideas can wander. That monastery is Antarctica. For millions of years after the formation of the ACC, the Southern Ocean became a sealed evolutionary vault. The waters around the continent were disconnected from the rest of the planet's ecosystems, not fully cut off, but insulated. Nothing warm-blooded or fast-swimming could easily push through the cold barrier. Species that required mobility and heat simply couldn't survive the crossing. What remained inside this cold ring were lineages capable of tolerating frigid temperatures, extreme stability, and the long, slow quiet of a world that almost never changed. And in the absence of change, evolution began to slow too. Not stop, not freeze, but slow into a rhythm unlike any other place on Earth. Species that survived the initial cooling entered a new environment where they weren't forced to constantly adapt to rapid shifts. There were no new predators appearing every few thousand years. No waves of migrants arriving, no sudden warm water invasions, no ecosystem resets like those in tropical reefs or temperate coastlines. Instead, Antarctic life experienced something rare: continuity. This continuity allowed traits that would normally be fragile or risky to persist. If a creature evolved a delicate body structure in warmer oceans, a shift in currents or the arrival of a stronger predator would eliminate it. Here, those delicate forms remained safe, protected by the slow, reliable conditions beneath the ice. Over generations, and then millions of years, these subtle, fragile traits changed shape. They expanded, they stretched, they grew into the extraordinary forms we now call Antarctic gigantism. But isolation did more than allow existing traits to flourish. It eliminated pressures that elsewhere shape life into very specific forms. In most oceans, survival is a negotiation between predators and prey, a constant race requiring speed, armor, agility, camouflage, or some intricate combination of the above. In Antarctica, that negotiation almost disappeared. The cold removed fast-swimming hunters. The currents blocked warm-water predators. Even the few predators that remained, some fish, starfish, certain slow-moving invertebrates, did not force prey into frantic movement. The ocean here doesn't race. It drifts. Without the selective pressure of constant pursuit, many species no longer needed the compact, efficient shapes required in turbulent, high-energy ecosystems. Their bodies did not need to hide, dart, or armor themselves. They didn't need to remain small to slip between rocks or crevices. In this world without urgency, fragility became an option, slowness became a survival strategy, and size became a possibility. The remarkable thing is that isolation doesn't only change the fate of animals, it changes the fate of time itself. Antarctica is one of the few places on Earth where evolutionary time feels stretched. Small creatures that would normally live a year might live 10. Species that develop rapidly elsewhere develop gradually here, almost as though the cold water is whispering to them, "Take your time, go slow, nothing is chasing you." This isn't poetic metaphor, it is physiology. Cold slows every chemical reaction in the body: digestion, growth, reproduction, aging. A creature whose metabolism ticks rapidly elsewhere ticks gently here. It doesn't need constant food. It doesn't need rapid maturation to outrun predators. It can afford a longer childhood, a slower adulthood, and a life that lasts far beyond what its warm water relatives could ever achieve. Imagine a species that grows only 1 or 2 millimeters a year. In tropical waters, that species might not survive long enough to reach impressive size. In Antarctica, it has decades. With decades, even millimeters become extraordinary. This is one of the hidden forces that connects isolation with gigantism. It's not that the environment pushes organisms to grow huge, it's that nothing interrupts them while they grow. Stability becomes the invisible canvas on which evolution paints. Scientists sometimes compare Antarctic ecosystems to ancient island systems, places like New Caledonia or Madagascar, where living species preserve traits lost elsewhere. But Antarctica takes this one step further. It is not just an evolutionary island in space, it is an island in time. Many lineages here appear to have branched off earlier than relatives elsewhere. Some species that existed millions of years ago have close analogues living still beneath the ice. A few, remarkably, appear to have changed very little at all. The deep sea sponges that rise like frozen towers, the sea spiders with limbs like strands of pale glass, the delicate, translucent amphipods drifting gently through the water, the worms that coil across the seafloor like living ribbons. These organisms are not primitive, they are persistent. They are survivors of a world where the ecological clock ticks slowly enough for ancient strategies to endure. And this endurance matters, because when life has uninterrupted time, when it is sheltered from upheaval, invasions, and sudden shifts, it experiments in ways we rarely see. Elsewhere on Earth, ecosystems are like classrooms constantly interrupted. The teacher must reset, the lesson must restart, new students arrive. In Antarctica, the class continues without interruption for millions of years. Such uninterrupted time is rare in nature, and what evolves in rare environments is almost always unexpected. So tonight, as we continue drifting through the cold, remember this: the giants of Antarctica did not emerge from chaos. They emerged from quiet, from stability, from solitude. They are the biological equivalent of a long, slow breath. In the next part, we explore one of the most powerful forces behind their size, something invisible, simple, and essential: oxygen, held in place by cold so intense it reshapes the chemistry of the sea. Cold, isolation, and time prepared Antarctica like a blank canvas, but something else was needed before evolution could paint giants across the seafloor. Something invisible, something quiet, something that enters the body not through lungs or gills in the dramatic sense we think of, but through skin, tissue, membrane, through surfaces so thin they barely separate an organism from the sea itself. Oxygen, not the oxygen of forests and breath, but oxygen dissolved softly in the water held there by cold, as if the ocean itself were inhaling and never exhaling. To understand why this matters, we need to abandon the rhythm of warm places and enter the slower beat of polar chemistry. Warm water moves fast. Molecules vibrate, collide, and escape one another like restless thoughts. Gases dissolve poorly in warm seas. They slip out, rise, release. Think of the way steam escapes from a cup of hot tea. Heat encourages freedom. Cold does the opposite. Chilling a liquid slows its molecules. They press more tightly together, leaving space paradoxically for gases to remain dissolved instead of fleeing upward. In cold enough water, the ocean drinks oxygen deeply and holds it like memory. Antarctic water isn't just cold, it hovers near the freezing point of seawater, dense and saturated with oxygen from surface to depth. Instruments lowered into the Southern Ocean return readings so high that they skirt the very boundary of what seawater can physically contain. The saturation is not seasonal. It does not flicker or collapse with storms. It persists year after year, century after century, just like everything else in this frozen world. For organisms living here, this is oxygen wealth. Most animals, especially simple-bodied ones, breathe through surfaces rather than lungs. In warm seas, such species remain small because the surface area of the body is the gate through which oxygen must pass. Small creatures thrive because they have proportionally more surface than volume. Large creatures struggle because oxygen simply cannot diffuse fast enough to feed a bigger body. But in Antarctica, that gate widens. With so much dissolved oxygen, bodies can grow without suffocating inside themselves. Surfaces do not need to be small. Skin does not need to be stretched thin. Limbs can lengthen. Tissue can thicken. Internal distance between cells can widen. Evolution suddenly finds room to build forms that would collapse from lack of oxygen anywhere else. A sea spider in tropical water must remain tiny so oxygen can diffuse through its legs quickly enough to reach every cell. But place the same lineage into Antarctic water, a world dense with oxygen and slow in metabolism, and suddenly the constraint loosens. Legs can grow. A palm-sized spider becomes dinner plate-sized, not through rapid bursts of change, but through slow accumulation over thousands of generations. Antarctic gigantism is less a miracle and more a quiet mathematics. Oxygen in, demand out, size made possible. But oxygen is not merely abundant, it moves gently. The stability of cold water prevents sharp drops or deoxygenation events. The chemical calm beneath the ice means an animal never has to shrink or evolve panic-driven adaptations to sudden scarcity. No tropical coral reef crisis, no upwelling collapse, no warm season of low supply. Instead, oxygen is steady, oxygen is patient, oxygen is generous, and evolution took its time accepting the gift. Deep within this chemistry lies one of the most elegant truths of biology. Life grows where resources are stable. If food is unpredictable, organisms remain small. If oxygen fluctuates, bodies stay compact to minimize risk. Fragile forms cannot survive chaos. They can only survive calm. Antarctica is calm in a way that defies every other ocean. The cold locks oxygen in place. The density of water transports it downward rather than trapping it at the surface. Shallow and deep layers remain connected like a slow, circulating breath. In some places, oxygen reaches nearly all the way to the seafloor without diminishing. Imagine for a moment that you are a creature living here. You do not breathe through lungs. You rely on oxygen soaking through flesh, diffusing slowly like ink through paper. In most oceans, your body is the size of a fingernail any larger, and the ink spreads too slowly to reach your core. But here, the water brings so much oxygen that your tiny diffusion channels never fail. You grow, you lengthen, you widen. Evolution does not reward excess, it simply permits it. And when permission lasts millions of years, excess becomes normal. Yet the story is not complete. Oxygen explains much, but not everything. Because if oxygen alone created giants, then every cold ocean would be filled with them. The Arctic should mirror the Antarctic. Norwegian fjords should hold worms meters long. Greenland waters should shimmer with tentacles trailing like underwater comets. But they don't. The Arctic has cold, it has ice, it even has seasons of deep isolation, yet its ecosystems rarely produce giants on the same breathtaking scale. There are exceptions, large amphipods here and there, oversized comb jellies, but not the broad, repeated patterns seen in the Southern Ocean, which means oxygen is a key, but not the lock. Something about Antarctica multiplies the effects of oxygen instead of merely allowing it. Something about the slow metabolism, the reduced predation, the incredible stability, and the deep time continuity amplifies what cold oxygen can do. Oxygen opens the gate. Time pushes life through it. Isolation keeps it there long enough to grow. This part of the story is simple chemistry, but also deep wonder. It is the realization that sometimes complexity begins with a molecule we take for granted, one we breathe every moment without noticing. Down here in the silent dark, oxygen is not a background element. It is architecture, foundation, blueprint. It is the quiet force that allows Antarctic life to rewrite the limits of size itself. And with this invisible permission granted, the ocean below the ice begins to reveal its residents. Creatures that were once tiny in distant oceans expand and reshape themselves, moving through the cold like slow stars. In the next part, we will step deeper into that mystery, into the realization that oxygen alone is not enough, and that the Antarctic giants are not the product of a single miracle, but of many forces woven together like threads in a story only nature could write. Oxygen gives us our first clear foothold in understanding why Antarctica breeds giants, but it is not the whole explanation. If it were, the Arctic would mirror the Southern Ocean. Cold is present there. Ice is present there. Dissolved gases are plentiful. And yet, the Arctic does not teem with palm-sized amphipods, arm-length sea spiders, or jellyfish trailing tentacles like drifting galaxies. Something is different here, something unique. Antarctica holds a secret that oxygen alone cannot reveal. To understand this, we must look at the patterns that do not follow the rule. Not all Antarctic species become enormous. Some, even with the same oxygen-rich environment, remain small and almost unremarkable in size. Delicate snails, tiny polychaetes, miniature crustaceans unchanged from their cousins in warmer waters. If oxygen were the only ingredient, gigantism would be universal. It isn't, and that's where the puzzle grows beautifully complex. Scientists often describe the search for answers here as peeling an onion. Remove one layer oxygen and another appears beneath it. Remove that, and you find metabolism. Beneath metabolism is predation. Under predation lies stability. And beneath stability is time, tens of millions of years of uninterrupted evolutionary experimentation. Oxygen opened the door to gigantism, but something else invited life to walk through it. Let's slow down and examine the pieces. 1. Antarctic animals use oxygen differently. Some giants breathe directly through skin. Others circulate oxygen using internal fluids. Still others evolve specialized blood proteins that transport oxygen efficiently in near-freezing water. In fish, antifreeze glycoproteins prevent blood from crystallizing into shards. In invertebrates, branching digestive systems extend into legs or arms, increasing the surface area available for gas exchange. It's not simply the presence of oxygen, it's the many ways life learned to use it. Imagine two animals standing at the edge of a river. The river is full of water, but only one animal knows how to drink. The resource is shared, but the benefit is not equal. Some species adapted to high oxygen and expanded. Others did not. Gigantism, then, is not a gift handed to every organism. It is an advantage that only some were equipped to claim. 2. The Arctic comparison exposes the missing ingredient. The Arctic, though cold, is not isolated in the same way. Its ocean connects directly to the Atlantic and Pacific. Warm water species enter, predators migrate, ecosystems reset frequently. Even under ice, there is disturbance, new arrivals, new pressures, new competition. Antarctica is different not because of what enters, but because of what does not. No sharks patrol the shallows. Few fast-swimming predators chase the slow. Warm water migrants rarely make it across the circumpolar barrier. In the north, life must stay fast, small, efficient. In the south, life is allowed to slow, stretch, expand. Oxygen helps giants breathe. Isolation lets them exist. 3. Experiments reveal fragility. Researchers have taken Antarctic amphipods into the lab. They warmed the water only slightly, just a few degrees. The results were immediate. Movement slowed. Feeding stopped. Metabolism faltered. Growth halted. Some individuals survived, but shrank over time, unable to maintain mass. Others perished entirely. This single observation reveals something crucial. Antarctic giants are not inherently strong. They are stable because their world is stable. Increase temperature, reduce oxygen, alter pressure, add predators, and the giants would vanish. This is evolution balanced like a sculpture of ice, beautiful, but dependent on delicately frozen conditions. 4. Why small species stay small. Here lies one of the most fascinating contradictions of the Southern Ocean. If food is abundant during summer blooms, why don't all organisms grow larger? If oxygen is plentiful, why do some remain miniature? The answer is hidden in biology's quiet arithmetic. Small bodies favor speed. Large bodies favor endurance. Some species thrive by growing fast, reproducing quickly, and dying young even in Antarctica. These species do not need size. They need cycles. Their survival depends not on longevity, but on timing, and in many cases, their evolutionary lineage never received the physiological toolkit to take advantage of Antarctica's oxygen wealth. They remain small not because they failed, but because they succeeded at a different strategy. Gigantism is not the inevitable outcome. It is one branch on a tree with many valid shapes. 5. Oxygen is the first clue, not the conclusion. Think of Antarctic life as a long equation. Oxygen is one variable, an essential one, but the solution requires many. Gigantism equals oxygen plus cold metabolism plus low predation plus stability plus longevity plus nutrient cycles plus deep time isolation. Remove any term and the pattern collapses. It is the combination that creates giants. Oxygen makes large size possible. Cold metabolism makes it sustainable. Predator scarcity makes it survivable. Time makes it visible. Evolution, given space and patience, wanders toward forms we rarely witness. Not through pressure, but through lack of pressure. Not through conflict, but through calm. The puzzle deepens, the mystery grows. Standing here in our journey, we realize oxygen was only the first doorway. The Southern Ocean opens many more. Why do amphipods grow large but not snails? Why do sea spiders stretch but not brittle stars? Why do Antarctic animals age slowly but live long? Why do delicate bodies not collapse under deep pressure? Each question is a thread. Pull one, and several more unravel. Antarctica is not merely cold, it is consistent. It is not merely oxygen-rich, it is oxygen-stable. It is not merely isolated, it is isolated through deep time. A perfect evolutionary laboratory. And now that we understand why oxygen alone is not enough, We are ready to begin meeting the giants themselves, creature by creature, limb by limb, tentacle by tentacle. The first of them waits just beneath the ice, drifting like pale ghosts across the seafloor. In the next part, we descend into their world and watch the amphipods, the tiny crustaceans that in these waters grow large enough to rest heavily in your hands. The first time a diver lifts an Antarctic amphipod into their gloved hands, there's a moment of disbelief. These animals, small, nearly invisible in most oceans, look enormous here. What should be the size of a grain of rice fills the palm. What should be a tiny flicker of movement becomes a slow, deliberate crawl. Side by side, the comparison is almost comic. A warm water amphipod fits easily on a fingernail. The Antarctic version looks as if it belongs to a different era, something ancient, scaled wrong, magnified beyond expectation. Yet these creatures are not relics. They are alive, common, and astonishingly abundant beneath the ice. Tonight, we drift closer to them, a tiny creature transformed. In most oceans, amphipods are the quiet workers of the seafloor, unseen scavengers that slip between grains of sand, picking through microscopic debris. They dart, twitch, and vanish at the faintest disturbance. Their bodies remain tiny because smallness is survival. Small bodies diffuse oxygen quickly. Small bodies hide easily. Small bodies escape predators. But in Antarctica, those rules change. Here, the amphipods move at a different pace. Their legs lift in slow, deliberate arcs. Their translucent shells glow with faint shades of cream, amber, or pale green. They drift rather than dart, their bodies suspended in water so cold that time seems to move differently around them. Touch one gently, and it feels almost weightless yet heavy compared to its warm water cousins, a contradiction shaped by millions of years of cold. Why they grow so large. 3 forces shape these Antarctic giants. 1. Cold plus oxygen. The water around Antarctica is saturated with dissolved oxygen. For creatures relying on diffusion across thin surfaces, this is a treasure. Where warm water amphipods suffocate if they grow too large, their Antarctic cousins breathe with ease. Their bodies can stretch, their limbs can lengthen, their internal distances can widen. What would be a limitation elsewhere becomes an opportunity here. 2. Slow metabolism. Cold slows everything. Muscles contract gently. Energy is conserved. Chemical reactions crawl rather than rush. A warm water amphipod must feed constantly just to stay alive. An Antarctic amphipod can take its time, using every scrap of energy more efficiently. With low energy demand comes the ability to grow slowly across many seasons, year after year, millimeter after millimeter, until size accumulates like layers of frost. 3. Minimal predation. Few predators patrol the shallow Antarctic seafloor. The ones that do slow-moving fish, starfish, certain invertebrates are not the sharp, fast hunters found in warmer oceans. Without constant threat, amphipods no longer need bodies optimized for escape. They don't need compact armor. They don't need to dart into crevices. They can simply drift. Evolution, freed from urgency, gently reshapes them. In the laboratory, what happens when the cold is removed? Scientists grew curious. Was Antarctic gigantism inevitable? Could it persist if conditions changed? They captured amphipods and placed them in controlled tanks. Then they warmed the water just a few degrees. Nothing extreme, nothing approaching tropical heat, just a slight rise, barely noticeable to us. The amphipods reacted immediately. Their movement slowed, not gracefully, but in distress. Their feeding stopped. Their metabolism faltered. Their bodies showed signs of stress within days. Some shrank. Others could not survive the warmer temperatures at all. These results revealed something profound. Antarctic gigantism is not just enabled by the cold, it is dependent on it. The giants are not flexible. They are specialists. Their bodies are tuned to a narrow, delicate range. Remove the cold, and the entire balance collapses. The Antarctic Ocean is not just a home, it is a requirement. Why the Arctic does not produce amphipods like this? The question arises naturally. If cold and oxygen create giants, why not the Arctic? The answer is in the history. The Arctic is a crossroads. Warm and cold waters mix constantly. Species migrate in and out. Fast predators are far more common. Seasonal variability is intense. Disturbance is routine, not rare. The Antarctic is not a crossroads, it is a sealed room, a quiet room, where nothing interrupts the slow growth of its residents. Evolution in the Arctic must race. Evolution in Antarctica can stroll. That difference shapes bodies. Watching a giant amphipod move through the water. Imagine drifting alongside one in the dim blue beneath the ice. Its legs long and careful step through the water like a slow underwater ballet. Its antennae sweep the surroundings in graceful arcs, sensing vibrations so faint that warmer waters would drown them out completely. Its movements are not frantic. Nothing in this world is frantic. It explores its environment with patience, touching, tasting, adjusting. Its pale shell catches light filtering through the ice above, refracting it in delicate patterns. In warmer seas, amphipods flick their bodies violently when disturbed. In Antarctica, they drift with the rhythm of the current, as though every movement is a response to the ocean's quiet breathing. There is something hypnotic about it. This creature that should be tiny, magnified by the calm of a cold world. How big do they really get? Size varies by species, but many Antarctic amphipods reach 2–3 centimeters, compared to warm water species only a few millimeters long. Some approach 4–5 centimeters in length. A few giants stretch even larger, filling a human palm. This is not marginal growth. It is an evolutionary rescaling. When placed beside their tropical relatives, the difference is not subtle, it is staggering. Scientists describe them as scaled-up versions of small crustaceans, grown to sizes that feel anatomically improbable. It is as if Antarctica has taken a common blueprint and expanded it into a new dimension. What amphipods tell us about Antarctica? Amphipods are not the largest Antarctic giants, nor the most fragile, nor the rarest, but they are among the clearest windows into how Antarctic conditions shape life. They demonstrate how oxygen enables growth, how cold slows metabolism, how stability allows generations of expansion, how minimal predation reduces the cost of large size, how narrow the temperature tolerance truly is. Most importantly, they show how delicate this balance is. Change the environment, and the giants vanish. The amphipods are living barometers, tiny but profoundly sensitive to water chemistry, temperature, and oxygen levels. In a warming world, they are among the first indicators of change. A slow, pale giant in a silent world. As we leave the amphipods drifting across the seafloor, their legs lifting delicately like dancers moving to a rhythm only they can hear, we recognize the deeper story. These animals did not grow large because they needed to. They grew large because nothing stopped them. They grew large because the world around them was quiet enough to allow it. Antarctica is a place where life is shaped by patience, not pressure. And in the next part of our journey, we meet one of the strangest and most elegant beneficiaries of this patience, the Antarctic sea spider, an animal whose very physiology defies the rules of warm water life and whose limbs stretch outward like living lines drawn across the cold. If you were to follow a trail of pale footprints across the Antarctic seafloor, Slow impressions pressed into soft sediment, you might eventually see the source drifting into view. At first, it appears as a shifting star, thin limbs radiating outward, a small central body hovering like a bead suspended in water. And then, with a gentle, deliberate step, it reveals itself, a sea spider. Not a spider in the true sense, no silk, no venomous fangs, no terrestrial cousins, but an ancient lineage of marine arthropods, so unusual that they look like a biology experiment left unfinished. They are all legs and almost no body, a geometry built on minimalism. Yet here, in the cold southern ocean, they grow to extraordinary sizes. Leg spans stretching across both hands, limbs so long they resemble strands of glass, movements so slow and precise they seem dreamlike. Sea spiders are among the most iconic Antarctic giants, not because they are the largest creatures here, but because their very existence feels like a contradiction. Everything about their anatomy suggests limitation. Everything about Antarctica lets them transcend it. Tonight, we watch them roam the seafloor with a grace found nowhere else on Earth. A body built from almost nothing. A sea spider's body is astonishingly simple. Most marine animals hide complex systems inside their torso. Gills, lungs, hearts, organs, not sea spiders. Their central body is tiny, smaller than a fingernail. Yet their legs can span 20 centimeters or more. It is the legs, not the body, that do most of the biological work. Inside each leg runs a thread-like network of tiny tubes that transport oxygen and nutrients. Their digestive system even extends into the limbs, branching outward like roots searching through soil. Instead of lungs or gills, they breathe directly through their thin exoskeleton. Oxygen diffuses inward, waste diffuses outward. No pumps, no ventilating organs, no dedicated respiratory structures at all. This is the kind of design that, in warm water, severely limits size. Diffusion-based breathing works beautifully for tiny creatures, but as size increases, it collapses under its own inefficiency. The distance between surface and core grows too large. Oxygen cannot reach the inner tissues fast enough. Large, warm water species need complex machinery gills, hearts, circulatory engines to keep all cells alive. A sea spider has none of that, and yet, in Antarctica, it becomes immense. How Antarctica turns fragility into strength. The Southern Ocean rescues the sea spider's improbable design in 3 ways. 1. Oxygen saturation. Near-freezing water holds extraordinary amounts of dissolved oxygen. Diffusion suddenly becomes viable over greater distances. A sea spider can stretch its limbs far beyond what warm water physics would allow. The legs act like giant breathing surfaces. The more they grow, the more oxygen they can absorb. Size becomes not a barrier, but an advantage. 2. Slowed metabolism. Cold water slows every chemical reaction inside a sea spider's body. It does not need rapid oxygen delivery. It does not burn energy frantically. It drifts through life at a metabolic whisper, perfectly matched to diffusion's quiet pace. 3. Minimal predators. A creature this fragile could not survive in tropical reefs or temperate coastlines. One sharp bite would sever limbs. One sudden current would snap a leg. But in Antarctica, predators are few. Fast hunters are rare. The water beneath the ice is calm, almost gentle. In this sheltered world, even delicacy becomes an evolutionary asset. Sea spiders move through the water like living stars. Watching one walk is mesmerizing. Each leg lifts in a slow, floating arc, then settles onto the seafloor with near-perfect balance. Their gait resembles underwater starlight pale lines bending and flowing across the sediment. The The movement seems almost too light for something so large, yet sea spiders carry themselves with incredible precision. They are not clumsy giants, they are careful ones. Sometimes, divers will find them crawling upside down along the underside of ice, legs spread outward like a multi-point compass. They appear suspended against gravity, navigating the frozen ceiling with quiet deliberation. Their slow pace is not weakness, it is the rhythm of the ecosystem itself. The most eerie detail: their hearts beat into the legs. Because their body is so small, the heart cannot push hemolymph, the insect-like blood they carry, through their long limbs. Instead, the digestive system helps. Muscular contractions inside the gut create a secondary pumping motion, pushing fluids into the legs and bringing oxygen back toward the body. Eating, for a sea spider, is partially a form of circulation. This unusual anatomy only works in cold environments where metabolic rates are slow enough that the gut's gentle contractions can supply the limbs. In warmer oceans, this system would fail. The animal would starve for oxygen long before it starved for food. Here in Antarctica, where time stretches and cold supports the delicate, the design thrives. Why some sea spiders become giants while others don't? Not all sea spiders in Antarctica grow massive. Several species remain small, only a few centimeters across. Their growth depends on a combination of oxygen abundance, body surface to volume ratio, feeding strategy, microhabitat stability, genetic lineage. Some lineages are ancient specialists, perfectly suited to exploit the cold. Others remain tied to the constraints of their ancestors. In many ways, the Antarctic sea spider community is a miniature ecosystem of evolutionary experiments, some successful, some limited. Yet the clear trend remains. Those with anatomies optimized for diffusion tend to grow, while those lacking certain structures do not. It is not luck. It is physiology aligned with environment, a creature shaped by patience, not pressure. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about Antarctic sea spiders is not their giant size, but how long they have persisted this way. Fossils suggest their lineage stretches back hundreds of millions of years. Through mass extinctions, shifting continents, and warming oceans, their basic body plan has remained stable. They survived by being simple. They grew by being patient. They expanded because nothing forced them not to. In Antarctica, the environment did not demand speed or armor or complex respiratory systems. It demanded endurance. It demanded oxygen efficiency. It demanded calm, and calm is what they received. Sea spiders as environmental indicators. Sea spiders are more than evolutionary curiosities. They are sensitive markers of environmental change. As waters warm even slightly, their physiology strains. Diffusion becomes less efficient. Metabolism speeds up. Oxygen demand rises. Limb circulation falters. These delicate giants may be among the first to suffer if the Southern Ocean warms. Their presence is a reminder that Antarctica's ecosystems are not just unique, they are vulnerable. Built from stability, they unravel when stability fades. A star-shaped giant drifting through a frozen world. As we leave the sea spiders behind, imagine their limbs tracing slow arcs beneath the ice, each step precise, each movement unhurried. They embody everything that makes Antarctica extraordinary. Fragility protected by cold, simplicity scaled into grandeur, ancient lineage preserved by isolation, impossible size made possible by patience. In the next part of our journey, we slip deeper into the sediment to meet a creature even stranger longer than an arm, soft as silk, and capable of extending a ribbon-like proboscis with startling speed. The Antarctic ribbon worms await. The deeper we drift beneath the Antarctic ice, the more the ocean begins to resemble a world drawn in slow, sweeping strokes. The light dims into a faint blue haze, the sediment softens, and eventually, the shapes on the seafloor shift from the familiar to the strange long lines, twisting gently in place, like threads loosely arranged by an unseen hand. These living threads are the Antarctic ribbon worms, also known as nemerteans, and they challenge our sense of proportion more than almost any other creature in these waters. In most oceans, ribbon worms are modest, slender animals only a few centimeters long, slipping quietly through sediment in search of small prey. But here in the Southern Ocean, they grow to lengths that seem almost unreal. A meter, sometimes more. Bodies so long they must curve, coil, and loop back on themselves several times just to fit within the camera's field of view. They appear like living lines drawn across the seabed, pale, delicate, and impossibly extended. Tonight, we follow one of these soft-bodied giants through the cold, a body without segments, armor, or bones. Ribbon worms have no shell to protect them, no segmentation like earthworms, no internal skeleton, no hard edges. Their bodies are smooth and fluid, with skin so thin it almost appears translucent under the soft Antarctic light. You can see faint outlines of internal structures, a digestive tract, muscle bands, a slender line of nervous tissue moving like shadows beneath the surface. This simplicity is deceptive. While their bodies look fragile, they possess one of the most remarkable feeding structures in the animal kingdom, a muscular, extendable proboscis that can shoot outward faster than a blink. And yet, in Antarctica, even this predatory weapon behaves differently. Hunting in slow motion. Picture a ribbon worm at rest. Its long body lies across the sediment, coiled in gentle patterns, responding only to the faintest currents moving past. Then, a small crustacean drifts nearby. In warmer waters, the worm might lash out quickly. But here, everything happens at the pace of cold. The proboscis unfurls like a ribbon pulled from a spool, slow but precise. The worm envelops its prey, not in a violent snap, but in a patient tightening. Antarctica has taught even its predators the art of quiet efficiency. This slow rhythm isn't a weakness, it's a match to the pace of life around them. Their prey, tiny amphipods, slow-moving larvae, small invertebrates, are no swifter in this near-freezing water. The environment levels everything. Predator and prey move within the same unhurried world. Why ribbon worms grow so long in Antarctica? Most soft-bodied animals face strict limitations on size. Without a shell or bones, large bodies risk collapsing under their own weight, tearing during movement, or losing internal integrity. But Antarctica neutralizes those risks in several elegant ways. 1. Cold water supports soft bodies. Dense, near-freezing water provides natural buoyancy. A long worm, floating or draped across sediment, experiences far less downward force than it would in warmer seas. 2. Low metabolic demand. Growing slowly over decades means tissue can accumulate layer by layer without the need for high-energy growth spurts. A warm water worm that tried to grow this long would exhaust itself. 3. Stable seafloor environment. Under the ice, there are no storms ripping the sediment apart, no violent currents capable of shredding delicate bodies. Fragility becomes a feasible strategy. 4. Few fast predators. In warmer ecosystems, soft, elongated bodies attract trouble. Here, predators are slow-moving. They overwhelm prey using patience, not power. Ribbon worms thrive because nothing here is designed to rip or crush them quickly. 5. Time. This is perhaps the greatest factor. Ribbon worms do not need to rush toward adulthood. They may take years to reach full size. And with decades available to them, length becomes a function of patience, not pressure. In many ways, their bodies are physical expressions of Antarctica itself. Long, quiet, stable, ancient. Colors and textures that mirror the ice. While many species are pale cream, white, soft yellow, some ribbon worms glow in deeper hues. Rust red, delicate pink, even nearly translucent blue. When touched by the faint light filtering through sea ice, their bodies shimmer like wet silk. Their skin glistens with a thin layer of mucus that helps them move through sediment and protects their tissues. This coating also prevents ice crystals or abrasive particles from tearing them, acting like a natural antifreeze slime. Even their colors tell a story. Cold oceans often filter out wavelengths of light, leaving blues and greens. These hues wash gently over the worm's surfaces, giving them an almost otherworldly glow. Life at the pace of the Antarctic seafloor. Ribbon worms do not swim far. They do not migrate long distances or chase prey. Instead, they tend to inhabit tight territories, often living within the same patch of sediment for years. Their lives unfold through slow feeding, slow growth, long digestion, long rest, and yet these rhythms are enough. During spring and summer, when phytoplankton blooms, surge and small prey becomes abundant, they feed. During the long winter, they endure. The cold slows their nourishment needs to a whisper. Where warm water worms might starve quickly, Antarctic worms can wait. What they reveal about evolution in isolation. Ribbon worms illustrate an essential truth about Antarctic gigantism. It is not a single advantage, but a partnership between many environmental forces. Their growth reflects cold that slows decay and energy use, oxygen that supports large volumes of tissue, stability that protects fragile structures, isolation that prevents fast predators from evolving, deep time that allows slow expansion. Their existence is an evolutionary statement. When chaos is removed, vulnerability can become possibility. If the Antarctic were warmer, their bodies would decay quickly. If predators were faster, their lengths would be liabilities. If storms tore through the shallows, they would rip apart. If oxygen levels fluctuated seasonally, their tissue would suffer, but none of that happens here. This is the only ocean on Earth where a soft-bodied animal can stretch endlessly without paying a heavy price. A silent movement across the seafloor. Imagine drifting above the sediment, watching one ribbon worm move. Its body coils gently, its front end lifting, exploring the water with a curious, almost elegant precision. Its proboscis, hidden until needed, remains tucked away, like a secret it carries lightly. In the distance, another worm lies curled in a circular knot. Farther still, a third traces a line across the sand. No rushing, no panic, just quiet geometry drawn across the ocean floor. These creatures are not large because they must be large. They are large because nothing here prevents it. They are living extensions of a world where time moves slowly and gently, where life has space to stretch, leaving the ribbon worms behind. As we drift upward from the seafloor, the ribbon worms fade beneath us like long brushstrokes painted onto the ocean bed. Their presence tells us something fundamental. Antarctica does not merely host giants, it sculpts them. And now, rising through the water column, we move toward creatures even more fragile: jellyfish, with tentacles so long they disappear into the blue, their bodies pulsing like slow heartbeats beneath the ice. In the next chapter, we meet the drifting giants of the dark, the Antarctic jellyfish. The deeper we rise from the seafloor and enter the open water column, the landscape shifts from the textured world of sediment to something almost cosmic. The light filtered through meters of snow-white ice softens into a permanent twilight. The water grows quiet, thicker somehow, as if infused with the slow heartbeat of the cold. And then, out of this soft blue gloom, shapes begin to appear. Circles, domes, pulses of movement so gentle that they look like breath-given form. Jellyfish, not the stinging drifters of tropical shallows, not the fleeting, translucent creatures that wash ashore in warm months. These are polar jellyfish, Antarctic jellyfish, animals shaped by silence and suspended thought, moving in rhythms so slow they seem to stretch time itself. In most oceans, jellyfish remain small. Their tissues are delicate, their bodies being more than 90% water tear easily in turbulent seas. But down here, protected beneath the ice, jellyfish grow into giants. Some species expand bells wide enough to resemble drifting lanterns. Others trail tentacles so long they fade into darkness before the eye can follow them. It is here, perhaps more than anywhere else, that Antarctica reveals the quiet physics enabling its giants. Tonight, we drift beside these slow, floating constellations, a body that shouldn't survive. Jellyfish are some of the most fragile animals on Earth. Their bodies are thin, gelatinous, and easily torn. They lack bones, muscles in the traditional sense, and any rigid structure. The pulse that moves them is a soft contraction of a ring of simple muscle cells. Their tentacles, long, nearly invisible threads, are thinner than a human hair. In tropical waters, these tentacles must remain short. Storms, currents, predators, and chaotic movement tear them constantly. Even the largest warm-water jellyfish, such as the lion's mane, live in turbulent environments that limit just how delicate their tentacles can become. But Antarctica changes the rules. Under the ice, the ocean is still so still that a tentacle can drift for meters without interruption. No breaking waves, no storm surges, no sudden currents rolling down from the surface. Only slow, predictable movements of cold water. This sheltering effect transforms fragility into possibility. In these calm waters, tentacles do not break, bells do not collapse, delicate tissues do not tear. Growth becomes safe, even for the softest creatures. Where turbulence rules, softness breaks. Where calm dominates, softness expands. The physics of stillness. To understand why Antarctic jellyfish can grow such extraordinary structures, we need to imagine the ocean not as empty water, but as a physical force interacting with bodies. In rough seas, water becomes a weapon. In calm seas, it becomes a support. Under the ice, the water column is buffered from the violent churn of storms by a thick, unmoving lid. The sea ice absorbs wind energy the way an insulated roof absorbs sound. Beneath it, everything becomes quiet. This quiet is not poetic, it's physical. Drag is reduced. Shear stress is minimal. Vertical mixing slows to a crawl. Turbulence becomes almost non-existent. In these conditions, jellyfish tentacles can stretch across vast distances without being torn. Some species have tentacles that exceed several meters. In extreme cases, researchers believe they can reach astonishing lengths, tens of meters, subtle threads drifting through the dark. These tentacles act like enormous fishing nets. They extend the jellyfish's reach across a wide radius, capturing drifting zooplankton in slow-motion collisions. In a world where food arrives gradually, surface area becomes everything. Antarctica doesn't reward speed. It rewards coverage, a feeding strategy built on patience. In warm oceans, jellyfish must feed frequently to sustain faster metabolisms. They pulse through the water, capturing prey quickly. Their bodies burn energy at a higher rate, and their tentacles, though numerous, are compact. In the Southern Ocean, the rules shift. Cold slows metabolism. Energy demand drops. Movement becomes optional. Antarctic jellyfish do not rush. They simply exist, drifting in the water column while their tentacles function as enormous, nearly invisible collection systems. Whenever a tiny crustacean or zooplankton touches a filament, nematocist stinging cells activate and reel the prey inward. The process is slow, measured, and perfectly tuned to an environment where food is abundant only during short seasonal bursts. Long tentacles allow jellyfish to intercept prey over larger distances, maximizing feeding during the Antarctic summer so they can endure the long winter. In this way, tentacle length is not luxury, it is strategy. Why jellyfish don't grow like this elsewhere? It is tempting to believe that cold water alone creates these giants. But the Arctic also has ice, calm seas, and cold temperatures, and yet its jellyfish rarely achieve such lengths. The difference lies not in the cold itself, but in the consistency of cold. The Arctic warms seasonally, ice melts more extensively, storm surges rise, warm water species migrate in, disturbance is routine. Antarctica, by contrast, is stable across unimaginable spans of time. Ice persists year-round in many regions. Seasonal mixing occurs gently. Disturbance from warm water is nearly non-existent. Predator composition changes slowly, if at all. This long-term stillness allows fragile body plans to persist for millions of years. Any jellyfish lineage capable of growing longer tentacles had the uninterrupted evolutionary runway to do so. In science, we often speak of selection pressures, but here, selection absence becomes a pressure of its own. A jellyfish's view of the world. Imagine being a jellyfish drifting beneath Antarctic ice. You do not have eyes, yet you sense light fading gently through the frozen ceiling above. You feel temperature changes with your entire body. You taste chemicals in the water that signal prey. You sense vibrations like soft touches from far away. You do not chase food. You do not flee predators. You simply drift, pulse, and extend your reach. Every movement is minimal. Every reaction is delayed. Every sensory experience is softened by cold. And yet, in this slowness, you thrive. A jellyfish may live longer here than in warmer oceans. Some individuals survive multiple seasons, unusual for a creature so delicate. Their longevity becomes another factor in their size. Growth, even at slow rates, accumulates. A tentacle adds millimeters each week. Over months and years, millimeters become meters. What seems like gigantism is simply uninterrupted growth in a world that asks nothing of them except patience. The quiet wonder of polar light. As we drift up through the water column, we see jellyfish bells illuminated from above by the faintest glow filtering through the sea ice. This light is not sharp or directional. It is diffused, softened into a blue haze that makes every pulse of the jellyfish appear like a heartbeat glowing in the water. Their bells rise and fall in slow intervals, each contraction pushing them upward a few centimeters before gravity and drag ease them back down. Their tentacles trail behind them like starlight dissolving in the dark. It is peaceful, hypnotic, almost unreal. This is the kind of place where time feels stretched, where minutes feel like hours, and everything alive seems suspended in a quiet dream, leaving the drifting giants behind. As we drift past the last jellyfish and continue toward the under-ice ceiling, the water grows paler. The world becomes brighter, but we carry with us the image of tentacles trailing like glowing threads into infinity. Jellyfish teach us that gigantism is not always about power. Sometimes it is the outcome of stillness, of an environment so calm and predictable that delicate forms can expand without fear. In the next part of our journey, we rise to the underside of the ice itself, where an entire ecosystem clings, grows, and thrives in the dim light of the frozen ceiling. If the seafloor is Antarctica's quiet foundation, then the underside of the sea ice is its floating sky, a ceiling that never moves, never breaks, never ripples with wind. It feels almost like a second continent suspended above the water, pale and solid, but alive with secrets. This frozen roof shapes the entire ecosystem beneath it in ways more profound than almost any other element of the Southern Ocean. Tonight, we rise toward that pale ceiling. As we ascend, the water brightens from deep blue to a soft, milky turquoise. Shadows stretch overhead where the ice thickens into ancient, interlocking slabs. And then, suddenly, we arrive in a world that resembles an upside-down meadow, because sticking to the underside of the ice, clinging to it like a living frost, are the microscopic architects of the Antarctic food web, algae. Millions upon millions of tiny organisms forming thin, fragile layers that look like faint velvet against the ice. They are the first spark of life in a place that spends half its year in darkness. They are the quiet engines that feed the entire ecosystem, and they thrive not despite the ice, but because of it, a ceiling that shelters the world below. Unlike the open ocean, the water beneath Antarctic ice is insulated from storms, waves, and wind. The ice absorbs energy like a thick blanket. Storms rage above, but below, the water never feels their violence. It remains calmer, in fact, than almost any other marine habitat on Earth. This unusual stillness accomplishes something remarkable. Delicate bodies can grow undisturbed. Microscopic algae cling to the ice for long periods. Particles drift slowly, feeding deeper layers. Fragile structures, long tentacles, thin limbs remain intact. The ice ceiling acts like a protective roof over an underwater cathedral. It creates a sanctuary. Without turbulence, even the smallest creatures can carry out their lives without being torn apart or scattered by sudden motion. This piece is not accidental. It is engineered through physics and temperature. Ice dampens water movement the way heavy curtains soften sound. It forms a rigid barrier between the chaos of the atmosphere and the quiet world below. In this tranquility, life flourishes in forms that would crumble anywhere else. Light filtered through ice. The light that reaches these algae is nothing like sunlight in warm oceans. There are no golden beams, no bright rays cutting through the surface. Instead, light arrives softly muted, diffused through thick layers of frozen crystals. It enters the water with a bluish glow, calm and uniform, with none of the sharp fluctuations caused by waves. For algae, this gentle illumination is perfect. They grow slowly, but steadily. They cling to the underside of ice like tiny forests. They turn the faintest hint of sunlight into energy. During much of the winter, darkness reigns. For months, nothing grows. But when spring comes, even before the ice begins to melt, the first hints of returning light awaken these microscopic plants. They begin multiplying in their thin sheets, turning the under-ice world into a floating meadow of pale green. And in doing so, they feed an entire kingdom, the base of a frozen food web. Small grazers, tiny amphipods, copepods, and other drifting invertebrates rise toward the ice to feed on these algae. They nibble at the frozen ceiling, gathering energy that will carry them through the long winter to come. These grazers are in turn eaten by larger animals, fish, sea spiders, and drifting jellyfish. And then the chain continues. Fish feed penguins. Krill feed whales. Small amphipods sustain massive predators. And the nutrients eventually drift downward, nourishing even the creatures on the seafloor. All of this, the entire marine system, depends on these microscopic under-ice plants to begin the cycle. It is astonishing to realize the largest animals on Earth, the great blue whales, depend indirectly on algae clinging to the bottom of Antarctic ice. A megaton body sustained by microorganisms covering a frozen ceiling, Antarctica is full of such paradoxes. A habitat made possible by stability. If the ice melted fully each year, these algae would lose their home. If storms regularly shattered the surface, they would be torn away. If warm water predators swept in, they would devour the grazers that feed on the algae. But none of this happens. The ice persists. In much of the Southern Ocean, the ice remains year-round, shifting gently but never fully disappearing. In other regions, it melts seasonally but returns faithfully, forming a predictable cycle that mirrors the rhythm of life. This predictability is rare in nature. Most ecosystems experience dramatic seasonal swings. Temperate oceans grow turbulent in winter. Tropical waters are battered by storms. Even the Arctic, its northern mirror, faces profound variability each year. But Antarctica remains steady, repeating itself with quiet precision. Stability is a kind of wealth. It gives life room to grow in ways that would be impossible in chaotic environments. It is the slow heartbeat of the Antarctic world. Creatures that walk the ice from below. Some animals use the underside of the ice like a floor. Sea spiders crawl across it with long, delicate steps. Certain starfish drift up and cling to it. Fish with antifreeze proteins swim just beneath it, weaving through curtains of algae. They treat the ice as an extension of the seafloor, another surface to explore, forage, and hide beneath. For them, this frozen ceiling is shelter, habitat, hunting ground, and nursery all at once. And because the water beneath the ice is consistent in temperature, chemistry, and light, they can evolve bodies and behaviors that rely heavily on predictability. This is why fragile forms thrive here. The world beneath the ice is steady enough to support them. The ice as a source of nutrients. As spring arrives and the ice begins to melt even slightly, it releases a pulse of nutrients stored within it: iron dust, minerals, trapped organic particles, algae fragments. This release acts like fertilizer spilled across the ocean surface. It sparks phytoplankton blooms so massive they can be seen from space, great swirls of green mixing into the blue sea. These blooms feed krill in staggering abundance. Krill feed penguins, seals, and whales. When the ice melts, it does not only recede, it feeds the ocean. Antarctica's largest predators, leopard seals, orcas, blue whales, trace their existence back to melting ice, a ceiling that holds the world together. As we linger beneath this icy sky, we begin to understand the quiet foundational role it plays. The ice does not merely freeze water, it sculpts an environment where gentle light nurtures fragile plant life. Calm water protects delicate structures. Nutrients are stored and released. Predators are limited. Stability shapes bodies and strategies. Without the ice, the Southern Ocean would be a different world entirely, more turbulent, more unpredictable, less suited to the giants that inhabit it. This frozen ceiling is not just part of the habitat, it is the architect of the habitat, leaving the ice and entering the deep rhythm of cold. As we drift downward, leaving the frozen underside behind, we understand that Antarctica is built from slow, interlocking systems. Each layer supports the next. Each quiet force amplifies another. Oxygen supports size. Stability supports fragility. Ice supports life. In the next part of our journey, we move deeper into the chemistry of cold itself, how low temperatures reshape metabolism, slow time, and grant animals lives that stretch across decades. The secret of gigantism is not only oxygen or ice, it is time itself. If you sit silently Underwater in the Southern Ocean, truly still, letting the cold seep into your awareness, you begin to feel something unusual. Not danger, not discomfort, but slowness. A deep, pervasive slowness that settles into every thought, every movement, every pulse of life around you. Down here, time behaves differently. Not because minutes pass more slowly, but because every living creature moves in a rhythm dictated by the cold. From the largest jellyfish to the smallest amphipod, the world functions as though a great invisible hand has turned the clock's gear to its lowest setting. Tonight, we explore how that cold does more than chill the bones. It changes chemistry. It rewrites biology. It stretches lifespans and reshapes bodies, and it becomes one of the most essential forces behind the giants that drift through the Antarctic deep. Cold slows life to a whisper. All life on Earth is powered by chemical reactions. Molecules collide, bond, break apart, and reassemble in endless cycles. These reactions fuel growth, movement, feeding, reproduction, everything. The rate at which they happen depends on temperature. In warm places, heat gives molecules more energy. They move quickly, collide frequently, react rapidly. Tropical oceans hum with metabolic intensity. Fish burn calories in bursts. Jellyfish pulse vigorously. Everything is faster. But in Antarctica, the cold reduces molecular movement to a crawl. Muscles contract slowly. Chemical reactions unfold gently. Growth takes years instead of months. Feeding becomes measured and deliberate. Heartbeats stretch into slow, calm intervals. This doesn't make the animals weak. It makes them efficient. A creature that burns energy slowly requires far less food. It can survive long winters with minimal resources. It can endure famine without collapsing. It can allocate energy toward growth instead of frantic survival. In this slow-motion world, gigantism becomes possible, not through rapid expansion, but through accumulation, a new relationship with time. Imagine a warm water amphipod. It must grow quickly. It must reproduce quickly. It must stay small enough to hide from predators, but large enough to survive. Its entire life is a race intense and brief. Now imagine an Antarctic amphipod. It is not being chased. It is not starving. It is not rushing. Its metabolism ticks like a clock in deep winter, steady, slow, almost meditative. Its growth unfolds over years. Its lifespan stretches over a decade or more. Unlike its tropical cousins, which often live only a year, the Antarctic amphipod experiences many cycles of the cold. Give a creature time, and it will grow. Give it generations of uninterrupted time, and it will evolve to grow larger. Antarctica offers that gift. This is why many organisms here are not just large, they are old. Some sea stars may live for half a century, some sponges for centuries. Even tiny invertebrates outlive animals many times their size elsewhere. Longevity becomes the secret engine of gigantism. Slow growth builds big bodies. Fast growth produces a certain kind of organism, compact, efficient, designed to survive rapid changes. Slow growth produces something very different. Using small amounts of energy, season after season, tiny increments accumulate into something remarkable. Think of it like snowfall. One snowflake is nothing, but slow, steady snowfall builds glaciers. Likewise, one season of growth adds millimeters, one decade adds centimeters, one lifetime adds a body that rivals species found nowhere else. Because metabolism is slow, cells divide gradually, tissues grow thicker, limbs lengthen over many cycles, structures strengthen slowly, complexity accumulates without strain. This is gigantism not as a burst, but as a long exhale. Slowness is not weakness, it is strategy. To us, fast often feels like strength. In the animal world, speed is often synonymous with survival. But in the Antarctic, the opposite is true. Speed wastes energy. Speed increases oxygen requirements. Speed is unnecessary in a world where predators are slow and prey are slower. Evolution here selects not for urgency, but for endurance. Slow metabolism means reduced food demand, extended survival during winter famine, less need to flee, less wear on tissues, longer lifespans. Even the simplest creatures benefit. Amphipods that would starve elsewhere survive long winters with ease. Worms that require time to grow acquire astonishing length. Jellyfish that elsewhere would be torn by storms live long enough to accumulate tentacles meters long. Slowness is the currency of life beneath the ice. Cold protects the body from decay. Heat accelerates decomposition and cellular damage. In warm environments, tissues age quickly. Proteins break down faster. Reactive molecules build up. Cells must constantly repair themselves. Lifespans shorten. Cold delays these processes. It slows oxidative stress. It reduces DNA replication errors. It preserves tissues. It allows organisms to avoid rapid aging. Even the smallest invertebrates here age like ancient trees layer by slow layer. This isn't immortality, but it is closer to what immortality feels like for creatures built from delicate flesh. Some Antarctic sponges grow so slowly that their age is measured not in years, but in centuries. Their lives span ice ages and interglacial periods. Their bodies hold the memory of oceans long vanished, a world where even predators move slowly. Metabolism affects not just the giants, it affects everything that hunts them. Many Antarctic fish barely move, conserving energy with meticulous precision. Their bodies contain antifreeze proteins that allow them to swim in water cold enough to freeze their blood without protection. Their movements are slow and deliberate. Their hunting strategies patient. Their metabolisms softened into rhythms shaped by the cold. This means prey animals are not pressured to remain small for the sake of escape. They do not need sudden bursts of speed. They do not need to hide constantly. They grow larger because it is safe to do so, and because larger bodies conserve heat and energy more efficiently. Predators and prey share the same tempo. Nothing disrupts the slow harmony. Energy budget. The penguin and the worm. Consider a penguin in warm waters. It must eat constantly to maintain its high metabolism. Now consider a worm in Antarctic waters. Its daily requirement might be a tiny fraction of that of similar species elsewhere. Energy budgets define what is possible. Warm world, eat often, grow fast, die young. Cold world, eat rarely, grow slowly, live long. The temperature of the water becomes the temperature of life itself. A universe built from slowness. As we descend once more into the dark blue layers beneath the ice, we feel the cold settle again around us. It is not harsh or punishing, it is peaceful, a world where everything moves in soft intervals. In Antarctica, slowness is not a limitation, it is a shaping force. It is the sculptor of giants. Because when you slow life down, truly slow it, nature has the time and space to create organisms of extraordinary size and quiet complexity. In the next part of our journey, we explore another pillar of gigantism, the surprising absence of fast predators. In a world without speed, vulnerability becomes a viable form of life. If you sit long enough beneath Antarctica's sea ice, long enough for your mind to synchronize with the slow pulses of the cold, you begin to notice something missing. Not animals, not movement, not life, but fear. In most oceans, fear is everywhere. It shapes bodies, it dictates behavior, it drives evolution, through a relentless cycle of pursuit and escape. Small creatures stay small because smallness is survival. They slip into crevices, vanish into sand, dart between stones, hide from flashes of teeth. But here, beneath the Antarctic ice, fear has been softened into something almost unrecognizable. For millions of years, this ocean has been a landscape with remarkably few fast predators, and when danger slows, life grows. Tonight, we explore one of the quietest but most powerful forces behind Antarctic gigantism, the absence of things that kill quickly. Why the Antarctic lost its hunters. To understand this, we must return to the formation of the Antarctic circumpolar current. When the continent was sealed off behind a wall of cold water, warm water species, including many predators, could no longer easily enter. The Southern Ocean became a closed system, shaped by a brutal climate that only certain species could tolerate. The result? Sharks struggled in water near freezing. Fast bony fish could not maintain muscle speed. Large predatory reptiles had long vanished. Cephalopods persisted, but not as rapid hunters. Warm water invaders rarely crossed the current's threshold. Across millions of years, Antarctica lost an entire category of animals that shape marine ecosystems elsewhere. Speed-based predators. In tropical reefs, predators dart. In temperate kelp forests, hunters weave through fronds. In the deep sea, ambush predators spring suddenly. But here, the hunters drift. Cold makes speed impossible. Cold slows everything, including predators. Muscles contract more slowly. Nerves transmit signals sluggishly. Reflexes fade into near stillness. A tropical fish strikes like lightning. An Antarctic fish moves like a thought forming. The biomechanical truth is simple. Fast hunting requires warm muscles. Predators need speed to catch prey, and prey needs speed to escape. But in Antarctica, the water is too cold for rapid acceleration. Even species capable of bursts of speed elsewhere become sedentary, deliberate, cautious. Danger still exists, but it is slow. A predator here approaches at a pace that would be considered lethargic in other oceans. For prey, this changes everything. Survival strategies no longer require constant vigilance or rapid evasion. Escape does not demand small bodies or rapid darting movements. The cost of being large disappears. Why gigantism thrives when predators are few. In ecosystems ruled by speed, small size is a defensive advantage. But in Antarctica, where predators strike slowly and sparingly, smallness is unnecessary, sometimes even disadvantageous. Large bodies help animals store energy for long winters, resist freezing temperatures, grow slowly without fear, stretch limbs into feeding or sensory structures, explore new ecological niches. Predation pressure shapes evolution like a sculptor's chisel removing forms that do not survive. Remove the chisel, and forms begin to drift into unexpected shapes. Antarctica is a gallery of such shapes, the strange quiet of the shallows. The shallows of Antarctica look nothing like the bustling coral reefs of the tropics. Instead of fast-moving schools of fish, you find slow drifters, patient feeders, and ancient invertebrates spreading across the seafloor like frozen constellations. Here, amphipods crawl openly. Sea spiders roam without hiding. Ribbon worms lie unburied on the sediment. Soft-bodied animals stretch into delicate shapes. Why? Because predators capable of tearing them apart quickly simply aren't there. It is one of the few places on Earth where vulnerability is not a death sentence. In the Caribbean, an oversized amphipod would be eaten within minutes. In Antarctica, it can live for years, even decades. When predation pressure vanishes, evolution wanders. Everywhere else on Earth, predation forces animals to be fast, hidden, armored, efficient, compact. But in Antarctica, where danger drifts instead of darts, evolution follows different rules. It favors large surface areas for oxygen absorption, slow-moving bodies that conserve energy, fragile structures that enhance feeding, long lifespans, exploratory growth. Animals evolve not against enemies, but with the pace of the environment itself. Predation is no longer the architect of form. The environment is. The few predators that remain are slow ones. There are predators here, just not fast ones. Some Antarctic fish hover above the seafloor, waiting for movement. Starfish slowly envelop prey, taking hours or days. Nematode worms ambush tiny creatures with patience. Seals and penguins hunt further offshore, but rarely disturb shallow communities. These species shape the ecosystem through stillness, not speed. Even seals, magnificent, efficient predators in the open ocean, rarely patrol the shallow, ice-covered zones where the giants roam. They prefer deeper waters, where fish and krill move in larger numbers. The giants of the shallows have been left largely undisturbed for millions of years. Imagine an entire neighborhood left unvisited by predators for millennia. What bodies would evolve? What shapes would persist? What strategies would flourish? Antarctica answers this question with its wildlife, creatures that look like they belong to a slower, older Earth. Why a predator-free world favors the strange. When species are no longer pressured to stay small and fast, evolution can explore fragile geometries, elongated bodies, large surface area limbs, slow growth strategies, low energy lifestyles. This is why we see giant sea spiders with thin, spindly legs, amphipods quadruple the size of warm water cousins, ribbon worms meters long, jellyfish with tentacles stretching into the dark, sponges rising from the seafloor like frozen towers. These forms are not absurd or excessive. They are logical outcomes of an environment stripped of speed. When nothing is chasing you, you can afford to take your time becoming yourself. The evolutionary cost of calm. There is a downside to all this tranquility. Specialization. The animals of Antarctica are exquisitely tuned to one environment, stable, cold, slow, predator light. Their bodies are built for a world that rarely changes. This makes them vulnerable. A small rise in temperature, a new invasive species, a shift in oxygen levels, a subtle increase in storm turbulence. Any of these changes could disrupt a system that has remained steady for millions of years. Giants thrive because the world is still. If the stillness fades, so do the giants. A world balanced on quiet. As we drift away from this world, shaped not by teeth, but by absence, we begin to understand something profound. In most oceans, life grows small because it must hide. In Antarctica, life grows large because it does not. This frozen ocean is a sanctuary not from cold, but from haste. Danger has been slowed. Fear has been softened. Evolution has been left unchased. And in this long pause, life has stretched itself into remarkable shapes. In Part 14, we explore another rhythm shaping Antarctic gigantism, the seasonal cycle of abundance and scarcity, a world where a brief feast must carry life through a long, dark winter. If the Antarctic world moves slowly, it is not because it is predictable or gentle. Quite the opposite. Down here, the rhythm of life is shaped by one of the most dramatic seasonal contrasts found anywhere on Earth. For half the year, the Southern Ocean descends into a darkness so complete that light becomes a memory. The sun sinks below the horizon, and an endless winter settles across the continent. During these long months, the water grows cold even by Antarctic standards. The world beneath the ice becomes quiet and empty. Food sources dwindle until they are almost non-existent. Then, suddenly, violently, almost light returns. A brief spring, a short summer, a narrow window where sunlight reaches the ocean and transforms the cold into an engine of abundance. In this fleeting season, microscopic life blooms in quantities so immense they can be seen from orbit. The ocean becomes a feast, and in that feast lies another key to Antarctic gigantism. Tonight, we explore how the strange rhythm of feast and famine shapes the bodies, strategies, and survival of Antarctica's giants. A winter without light. For roughly 6 months, the Antarctic is swallowed by darkness. No sunrise, no faint glow, only night. During this time, photosynthesis stops almost entirely. Phytoplankton, the primary source of food for countless species, declines to levels nearly too small to measure. The water becomes clear, empty, quiet. What remains alive must endure. In most ecosystems, a loss of food this profound would be catastrophic. Species would vanish, populations would collapse. But in Antarctica, organisms are built for this rhythm. Their slow metabolisms, sculpted by the cold, allow them to survive long periods with minimal nourishment. Some store fat, some reduce activity to near stillness. Some stop growing entirely. Some rely on tiny, drifting fragments of organic matter falling from above. Their bodies are tuned to endure famine, not avoid it. This capacity is one of the hidden foundations of gigantism. Large bodies can store more energy. Slow metabolisms burn it sparingly. Long lifespans smooth over bad seasons. Survival here is not about speed, it is about patience. The spring bloom, when light returns like a thunderclap. Then, suddenly, the sun returns. Not gently, not gradually. It rises over the horizon like a shock. The ice begins to thin. The top layer melts into a lens that traps sunlight. Nutrients that accumulated during winter rise from the deep. Iron, locked inside sea ice, is released back into the water. Within days, sometimes hours, the phytoplankton begin to multiply. Within weeks, the water becomes cloudy with microscopic life. This is the great Antarctic spring bloom. A biological explosion so massive it can feed whales, fuel migrations, and push entire ecosystems into motion after months of starvation. In this brief season, krill swarm in unimaginable numbers. Amphipods gorge and grow. Juvenile fish mature rapidly. Jellyfish expand their tissues. Sea spiders enter reproductive cycles. Predators return from deeper waters. This is the moment every creature has been waiting for. Millions of years of evolution have shaped Antarctic species into masters of timing, able to capitalize on a narrow window of abundance and then stretch its benefits across a winter half a year long. Why a short feast favors large bodies? It seems contradictory, a world of scarcity producing giants. But in systems ruled by feast and famine, gigantism becomes a powerful strategy. Large bodies store energy efficiently during the bloom, endure long periods of scarcity, age slowly, allowing multiple cycles of growth, hold more reproductive energy, supporting the next generation. Small creatures, in contrast, struggle. Their higher metabolism burns energy quickly. They cannot wait out famine. They require regular food supply, something Antarctica cannot provide. Elegant math emerges. Short feast plus long famine equals selection for slow, large, energy-efficient bodies. This is why Antarctic animals often grow not in quick bursts, but in long, slow arcs across decades. The great energy conveyor. When the bloom arrives, enormous quantities of organic matter are produced, Some of it is eaten, some drifts downward as marine snow, soft flakes of dead plankton, fecal pellets, and decomposing fragments. In tropical waters, this material sinks rapidly. In Antarctica, the cold slows its descent. Particles drift like falling snowflakes, feeding layers of life all the way to the deep shelf. This slow descent nourishes amphipods scavenging on the seafloor, worms waiting in sediment, starfish drifting across the bottom, sponges filtering water in nearly still motion. Even the deepest regions receive a share of the summer feast. The bloom becomes a conveyor belt of energy, delivering food to organisms that may go months without eating again. Juvenile strategies. The art of waiting. In warmer ecosystems, juveniles grow quickly because danger is immediate and constant. Delay means death. But in Antarctica, juvenile animals often grow slowly, sometimes pausing entirely for long stretches. Some larvae remain dormant through winter. Some enter suspended animation-like states. Some rely on minimal reserves stored inside their bodies. Some wait for the next bloom before growing at all. In this world, patience is inherited. Time is the most important resource. Growth is not a race, but a negotiation with the seasons. Slow-growing juveniles eventually become slow-growing adults. Slow-growing adults become long-lived organisms. Long-lived organisms accumulate mass over decades. This is the quiet logic of gigantism, the ice as seasonal memory. Sea ice plays a crucial role in the feast-famine cycle. It thickens during winter and melts during summer, acting like a reservoir of nutrients. Iron trapped inside the ice is released into the water when the melt arrives, fueling phytoplankton growth. In this sense, the ice is not just a ceiling, it is a seasonal bank account, depositing nutrients in winter, releasing them in spring, storing them again the next year. This cycle has been repeated for millions of years with astonishing consistency. It is the reliability of the cycle, not its intensity, that shapes life here. Even famine becomes predictable, and predictable scarcity is survivable, a rhythm that favors giants. Antarctica's feast-famine cycle is one of the most extreme on Earth, yet paradoxically, it enables large, slow-growing, delicate creatures to thrive. If food were abundant year-round, predators would flourish. If abundance never came, starvation would wipe species out. If seasons fluctuated wildly, metabolic strategies would collapse. But here, the balance is precise. A short burst of plenty, a long stretch of quiet, a stable, cold environment, minimal disturbance, deep, oxygen-rich layers. Together, these forces create a world where gigantism doesn't just happen, it endures, leaving the season of extremes behind. As we drift downward again, leaving the under-ice bloom behind, we understand that a world built on scarcity and abundance does not force life to shrink. It forces life to adapt creatively. And in Antarctica, creative adaptation becomes grandeur. In the next chapter, we move across millions of years to explore how ancient ice ages sculpted the evolution of these giants, and how glacial cycles erased habitats, then restored them, giving only the slowest and most resilient species a chance to survive. To understand the full story of Antarctic gigantism, we must now leave the present, leave even the last few thousand years, and drift deep into the past, past the ages when humans walked the earth, past the rise and fall of civilizations, past the first mammals and flowering plants. We travel into deep time, because Antarctica's giants were not shaped by a single climate, but by cycles of climate's vast glacial rhythms that have repeated across millions of years, each cycle a pulse, each pulse reshaping the land, the ice, and the ocean in ways subtle yet profound. Tonight, We explore how those long cycles, ice advancing, ice retreating, helped sculpt a world where slow, resilient, long-lived creatures could thrive. The continent of endless ice ages. Antarctica did not freeze once. It froze again and again and again. Glaciers grew across the continent, then shrank. Ice sheets deepened, then fractured. Sea levels fell, then rose again. Underwater basins were exposed and reflooded. Entire ecosystems were erased, then rebuilt. These cycles unfolded over tens of millions of years, and unlike the ice ages affecting the northern hemisphere, which came and went relatively quickly, Antarctica's cooling was long, persistent, and profound. While the rest of the world fluctuated between warm and cool, Antarctica remained locked in deeper and deeper cold. This had a powerful effect on marine life. Every time glaciers advanced, shallow habitats were destroyed, coastal shelves disappeared under ice. The species living there faced a choice: move deeper or die. Every time glaciers retreated, new space opened and surviving species recolonized it. Over millions of years, this repeated displacement favored traits many Antarctic giants share: tolerance for darkness, endurance during food scarcity, slow, steady metabolism, ability to survive pressure and cold in deeper waters, long life with slow reproduction. In short, the only species that survived Antarctica's glacial cycles were those capable of wading through buried coastlines, wading through shifting currents, wading through centuries of deep freeze, waiting until the sea returned. The giants of Antarctica are the descendants of survivors, not just of predators, but of time. Refuges, the hidden sanctuaries of survival. When ice ages expanded across Antarctica, they scraped the seafloor clean. Shallow ecosystems vanished. Coral-like structures, sponge gardens, and delicate communities were wiped away. And yet, life persisted. How? Through refuges, deep basins, narrow canyons, and trench-like depressions that remained ice-free even during the most severe glacial advances. In these hidden sanctuaries, species survived for thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, protected from the crushing weight of advancing ice. Inside these refuges, cold remained stable, predators remained limited, oxygen remained abundant, food, though scarce, still drifted down. Evolutionary time stretched unbroken. When the glaciers retreated, these species spread outward again, recolonizing the newly exposed shelves. This pattern repeated through glacial cycle after glacial cycle. Each time it did, the species best suited to slow growth, long survival, and deep patience expanded. The fast, the fragile, the short-lived, they faded. They could not survive repeated collapses of habitat. Antarctica selected for the unhurried, recolonizing a post-ice world. Imagine an ancient ice age ending. The ice retreats, slowly, painfully, exposing new seafloor. Sediment settles. Sunlight returns. Algae begin to grow. The ecosystem awakens. Who moves in first? Not fast-swimming fish. Their mobility matters little when massive ice sheets shape the land. Not delicate tropical species blocked by the circumpolar current. Not rapid-growing predators. Speed offers no advantage in freezing water. Instead, the first colonizers are the patient ones. Amphipods drifting from refuges. Ribbon worms emerging from deep sediments. Sea spiders extending their spindly limbs, sponges releasing larvae that settle into new places, jellyfish drifting through openings in retreating ice. These animals recolonize slowly but steadily. They rebuild the ecosystem from the ground up, their bodies shaped by ages of slowness, now spread across newly opened worlds. This repeated expansion and contraction is one of the great sculptors of Antarctic life. It explains why many species here share similar traits: persistence, longevity, slow breeding, deep tolerance for hardship. These are the traits of survivors. Why deep time favors giants. When glacial cycles erase habitats, only certain strategies work. 1. Long life. Species that live decades or centuries are more likely to outlast glacial extremes. 2. Slow growth. Slow-growing animals avoid metabolic collapse during long periods of scarcity. 3. Wide oxygen utilization. Large surface area bodies thrive because oxygen is always plentiful in cold waters. 4. Resistance to disturbance. Fragile but slow and energy-efficient species survive deep cold better than fast, fragile warm water species. 5. Deep mobility. Species capable of retreating into deeper waters endure until the ice pulls back. These traits overlap perfectly with gigantism. Large animals often grow slowly, live long, reproduce intermittently, endure scarcity, survive pressure changes. Glacial cycles reinforce these traits again and again. Antarctica did not simply select for giants once it selected for them repeatedly across millions of years. A forgotten chapter, the extinction that didn't happen. Elsewhere on Earth, glacial cycles caused extinctions. Tropical species died when temperatures dropped. Temperate species vanished when environments shifted too quickly. But in Antarctica, many species survived every glacial period, not by adapting quickly, but by being adapted for slowness itself. In deep refuges, species continued ancient lineages unchanged for millions of years. Some Antarctic sponges alive today may be direct descendants of sponges that lived before human evolution began. Some sea spider lineages trace back to the age of dinosaurs. Some amphipods resemble species seen in fossils older than the first mammals. Antarctica preserved not just species, but lineages, entire evolutionary branches pruned away everywhere else. This is why the Southern Ocean feels like a living time capsule, a place where ancient designs persist, scaled into modern giants, a world shaped by cycles, not catastrophes. Many ecosystems are shaped by sudden events: volcanic eruptions, asteroid strikes, invasive species, warm water pulses. Antarctica, by contrast, is shaped by rhythms, slow, repeating, vast oscillations of ice and water. These cycles are predictable in the grand scope of time, slow enough for life to adjust, stable enough for survivors to endure, long enough for giants to grow. Everything in Antarctica, its pace, its size, its ancient feel, comes from this deep, rhythmic history. Just as tides shape shorelines, ice ages shape giants, leaving deep time behind. As we rise from the layers of ancient memory, drifting back into the modern ocean, we see Antarctica not as a frozen anomaly, but as the product of millions of years of repeated sculpting. Gigantism here is not an accident. It is the result of deep, oxygen-rich cold, slow metabolism, few predators, extreme seasonal cycles, and deep-time glacial rhythms. Each force alone is interesting. Together, they create something extraordinary. In Part 16, we explore yet another pillar: the physics of cold water, its self-density, buoyancy, and how the Antarctic Ocean supports giants that elsewhere would collapse. If we want to understand why Antarctic creatures can become so large, we must look not only at biology or climate, but at the very substance that carries them: water. Not water as we experience it from a glass or a river, but water transformed by cold into something heavier, denser, and more supportive, something capable of holding fragile giants aloft. Tonight, we explore the physics of cold water, how density, buoyancy, and chemistry create a stage where life can stretch into delicate, improbable forms. Because gigantism isn't just an evolutionary story, it's a physics story. Cold water is heavy water. As water cools, its molecules slow down and pack more tightly together. Unlike air, which becomes lighter when colder water becomes denser as its temperature drops, all the way down to just above its freezing point. The Southern Ocean, hovering around 1.8 degrees Celsius, the freezing point of salt water, is among the densest waters on Earth. What does this mean for life? It means the water itself acts like a cradle holding organisms up, supporting their bodies, reducing the need for rigid skeletons, and making soft tissues buoyant. In warm water, a large body sinks quickly. In Antarctic water, it floats. This simple difference has enormous consequences. Long limbs don't sag. Soft bodies don't tear. Delicate structures don't collapse. Long tentacles drift instead of dragging. Density becomes an invisible support for creatures otherwise too fragile to sustain their own weight. The Antarctic giants are not just big, they are buoyantly big. Why cold oceans are kinder to soft bodies? In most oceans, water movement is energetic currents, waves, turbulence. Soft-bodied animals must stay compact to avoid damage. Long, thin forms rip easily, but Antarctica's dense, cold water cushions delicate shapes. Jellyfish bells, wide and thin, stay stable. Ribbon worms, meters long, don't tear. Sea spider legs, thin as glass, stay suspended. Amphipods drift without sinking. The water behaves almost like a soft gel, thicker, heavier, more supportive, not literally, but functionally. The difference is profound. This is why oceanographers sometimes describe Antarctic water as having a slowed quality. It flows, but it flows with weight. It carries life instead of tossing it. The world's slowest vertical highways. Cold water also has a special relationship with gravity. Because it's dense, the downward movement of particles, marine snow, algae fragments, detritus slows dramatically. Food sinks like drifting dust instead of falling stones. This slow descent nourishes everything: filter feeders, worms, amphipods, sponges, slow-moving predators. In warmer oceans, food rains down quickly. In the Antarctic, it drifts for days or weeks, feeding layers of life along the way. Density becomes an energy distribution system. Stable layers, stable lives. Density also creates stratification layers of water that stay separate because colder water sinks while slightly warmer water remains above. But in Antarctica, because everything is cold, these layers differ very subtly. The result is an unusual kind of stability: little vertical mixing, minimal temperature change, predictable chemical distribution, long-term oxygen saturation. These conditions remove stress from organisms. They no longer have to adjust constantly. They no longer have to survive sudden shifts. Stability isn't just comforting, it is liberating. How buoyancy shapes bodies. In cold, dense water, buoyancy is increased. Animals don't have to fight gravity. They can afford shapes that would crumble in other environments. Wide, gelatinous bells. Jellyfish grow enormous because gravity barely affects their weight underwater. Long, thin appendages. Sea spiders can push their legs outward for meters without causing structural strain. Thread-like tentacles. Some Antarctic jellyfish have tentacles that would break instantly in turbulent tropical seas. Soft, ribbon-like bodies. Worms can grow longer than human arms without internal support beams. Massive but delicate sponges. Sponges can rise several meters high despite lacking bones or shells. Physics becomes permission. In this water, the body is no longer a burden. It becomes an invitation to grow. Why this doesn't happen everywhere? The Arctic is cold too. So why doesn't it produce giants at the same scale? The answer lies in consistency. The Arctic warms in summer. Every year, Arctic water experiences more dramatic warming cycles. Density changes, layers mix, storm turbulence penetrates deeper. Warm water species migrate in. The Arctic is connected to the Atlantic and Pacific, letting fast predators enter. Salinity varies widely. River input in Arctic regions dilutes salt concentration, weakening density and destabilizing buoyancy. Ice cover is thinner and more variable. It does not shield the water the way Antarctic ice does. Antarctica's physics are not just cold, they are predictably cold, predictably dense, predictably oxygen-rich, predictably calm. This is the key: density plus oxygen, a partnership in gigantism. Cold water holds enormous amounts of dissolved oxygen. Combine that with density and buoyancy, and you get organisms that can grow thicker tissues, limbs that can grow longer, bodies that can remain large without suffocating, extended lifespans that allow accumulation of size. Oxygen makes gigantism possible. Density makes gigantism functional. One provides the fuel. The other provides the architecture. The counterintuitive gift of extreme cold. Most people imagine cold as hostile, a force that stops life. But in the Antarctic, cold is life's collaborator. Cold preserves. Cold stabilizes. Cold slows decay. Cold supports fragile shapes. Cold carries oxygen. Cold, in its extreme form, becomes a structural element of evolution. If warmth is a sculptor that carves fast, cold is a sculptor that carves slowly, with endless patience. Antarctica is what happens when life is given patience as its primary tool. Walking through a world held up by water. Imagine drifting behind a giant sea spider as it walks across the seafloor. Its legs glide effortlessly through the cold, dense water, hardly sinking, hardly resisting. A jellyfish pulses nearby, each contraction lifting it gently upward as if the water itself were supporting its weight. Below them, a ribbon worm curves like ink, unfurling in slow motion. Every movement is made possible not just by evolution, but by physics. Life here is shaped not only by what organisms can grow, but by what the water can hold. Cold water is the quiet scaffold upon which Antarctica built its giants, leaving the physics behind. As we drift away from the realm of density and buoyancy, we see that Antarctic gigantism is not a single mystery but a mosaic physics, biology, climate, and deep time interwoven. In Part 17, we return to one of the most mesmerizing giants of all, the jellyfish, and explore how tentacles extend beyond imagination, turning calm water into vast drifting nets of living silk. We return now to some of the most graceful giants of the Antarctic world, creatures so delicate they seem born from light itself, and yet so expansive that their bodies stretch into the dimness like drifting worlds. We return to the jellyfish, not because we've exhausted their mystery, but because the first encounter was only a glimpse. The deeper you drift into the Southern Ocean, the more you realize that jellyfish are not one organism, but many architectures built from the same elemental idea: a bell, a pulse, and threads cast into the dark. Tonight, we explore the tentacles, those astonishing trailing lengths of living tissue that defy physics in any other ocean. We explore how they feed, how they sense the world, how they repair themselves, and how Antarctica makes them possible. Because no creature reveals the poetry of cold water gigantism more elegantly than a jellyfish whose tentacles fade out of sight before your mind can fully comprehend their length. Anatomy of a ghost. Antarctic jellyfish carry bells that pulse gently, pushing them upward like floating lanterns. These bells can grow to impressive sizes, but their true wonder lies in the tendrils that spill downward. Tentacles that stretch meters, sometimes tens of meters, drift like hair in slow current, are thinner than cotton thread, hold thousands of microscopic stinging cells, barely disturb the water around them. Each tentacle is a living filament, a sensory and predatory organ combined. Through these fragile threads, the jellyfish perceives the world. It tastes chemical signals. It feels vibrations. It gathers food. In warm oceans, such delicate structures would break, tangle, tear, or dissolve in turbulence. Here, shielded beneath Antarctic ice, they become one of the longest structures grown by any animal on Earth. The physics of infinite reach. Why do tentacles become so long here? Because in a world where food drifts slowly, reach is everything. Antarctic waters are rich in microscopic life during seasonal blooms, but outside those windows, prey can be sparse. A jellyfish cannot chase food. It is a creature built for patience, not pursuit. Its best strategy is to increase surface area, to expand its sensory and feeding network outward. Long tentacles become living nets. Not aggressive nets, passive ones. They wait for food to come to them. Each tentacle acts like a fishing line cast into the water column. Thousands of them form a three-dimensional lattice of detection and capture. When a small crustacean or zooplankton brushes against one, nematocists fire in microscopic explosions, injecting venom and drawing the prey inward along a conveyor of pulsing tissue. This is hunting without movement. This is predation by presence. Antarctica makes it possible because water is calm. Density keeps tentacles suspended. Cold slows tissue damage. Predators rarely sever the threads. Turbulence is nearly absent. The tentacles can simply grow, and once they grow, they stay. A body that repairs itself. Antarctic jellyfish possess remarkable regenerative abilities. Cut one tentacle, and it regrows. Damage a portion of the bell, and the remaining cells reorganize to rebuild the structure. Even the intricate network of stinging cells replenishes over time. Cold helps this process by slowing decay. Damaged tissue does not rot or dissolve as quickly as it would in warm water. Regeneration becomes a long, slow, craft tiny cell by tiny cell, repairing the masterpiece. This resilience adds another layer to gigantism. A jellyfish that lives longer has more time to rebuild, refine, and extend itself. Longevity plus regeneration plus slow metabolism equals extraordinary size. Tentacles as sensory worlds. Though jellyfish lack a brain, they possess an exquisitely distributed nervous system, a network woven through their bells and tentacles. In Antarctic species, this network is expanded to accommodate the enormous lengths they must monitor. Each tentacle is a sensory organ, a feeding organ, a navigation tool, a defensive surface. As water passes along its length, microscopic signals convey information to the jellyfish. Changes in current, chemical trails, prey movement, disturbances, temperature shifts. A tentacle is not passive. It feels the world. The more tentacles, the longer the tentacles, the more information the jellyfish gathers. Gigantism here serves not just hunger, but awareness, the elegance of slow motion. Imagine drifting beside one of these giants beneath the ice. The bell pulses gently once every few seconds, sending a soft ripple of movement upward. The tentacles hang downward in an impossibly slow descent, swaying with currents so light they appear imagined. They twist, rearrange, and fold on themselves like ribbons moving through honey. You extend your hand, and the jellyfish drifts past, its tentacles trailing far below. The threads look so fragile, You expect them to break under their own weight, but they do not. Antarctic water cradles them. Cold slows the rate at which tissue tears. Density supports the threads like invisible scaffolding. Stillness ensures they are never violently shaken. Isolation keeps predators away. Every factor converges to make delicacy sustainable at impossible scales. How long can tentacles truly grow? Some Antarctic species have tentacles estimated to exceed 20 or even 30 meters. The truth is, we often cannot measure them accurately because they stretch far beyond camera lights, disappearing into the dark. Scientists suspect that some species, especially deep-dwelling siphonophores, may grow tentacles that approach the length of a blue whale or even surpass it. In the vast quiet of Antarctic water, tentacles can drift for hours without disturbance, extend across feeding zones, float over the seafloor like ethereal curtains, collect prey over distances no single movement could cover. Gigantism here is not a statement of size, it is a statement of space. The ocean offers infinite room, and jellyfish take it. Why this expansion happens only in Antarctica. The Arctic has jellyfish too, some large, some delicate, but it lacks the unchanging calm that Antarctica has sustained for millions of years. Here, everything aligns. Consistent cold, stable water layers, year-round ice cover, no large, fast predators, minimal mixing from storms, abundant summer blooms, long-lived lineages with millions of years to evolve. It is not just that tentacles grow long in Antarctica. It is that they are allowed to grow long, and nothing interrupts them. Evolution behaves like a painter given infinite time. Stroke by stroke, it extends the canvas. The jellyfish as symbol of Antarctic logic. When scientists try to explain Antarctic gigantism, they often speak of oxygen, cold, and metabolism. But jellyfish remind us of a deeper principle. Growth happens when nothing interrupts it. Tentacles grow long because nothing tears them. Nothing chases them. Nothing cuts them. Nothing forces jellyfish to restructure. Nothing radically changes the environment. Antarctica is a cathedral of stillness, and jellyfish are its quiet stained glass, their tentacles glowing softly in the filtered light, leaving the drifting threads behind. As we drift beyond the jellyfish's reach, passing through the invisible curtains of tentacles, we feel a shift in the water. Deeper, quieter regions await. Regions where creatures live for centuries, growing not through rapid cycles but through perseverance. In Part 18, we explore longevity, the secret engine behind gigantism, a world where decades become a single heartbeat and ancient creatures grow slowly into giants because they are given the one resource the rest of the planet rarely offers. If Antarctica teaches us anything, it's that size is not created quickly. Nothing here grows in rushing spurts or sudden leaps. Life in these waters stretches itself across long timelines, timelines that make our own sense of age feel comically small. Tonight, we explore one of the most silent yet powerful forces shaping the giants beneath the ice. Longevity, the simple ability to live a very, very long time, because in the Antarctic, time is not merely a backdrop, it is a resource, a weapon, a sculptor. This is a realm where decades feel like years, where growth curves flatten into whispers, and where ancient creatures, sponges, starfish, amphipods, worms accumulate size slowly, steadily, patiently. Longevity is the secret engine of gigantism, the long life advantage. In warm oceans, quick lifespans dominate. Grow fast, reproduce fast, die fast. This is the only way to survive in unpredictable, predator-rich, rapidly shifting environments. Most tropical creatures burn brightly but briefly, like sparks in a storm. Antarctica offers something different: shelter from speed, because the environment changes so little, because predators move slowly, because food availability is predictable in its cycles. Organisms do not need to rush. Here, surviving a long time is one of the most powerful evolutionary advantages imaginable. A species that lives 20 years makes 20 years of growth possible. A species that lives 200 years does something remarkable. It accumulates size across multiple centuries. Every season leaves a trace. Every decade adds a quiet layer. This is why so many Antarctic animals appear oversized, not because they grow fast, but because nothing interrupts their growth. Slow metabolism plus long life equals giants. Antarctic animals burn energy slowly. Their metabolism is not a flickering flame, it's a steady ember. That slowness, combined with long lifespan, yields bodies that accumulate mass like slow geological formations, a few millimeters each year, a few centimeters each decade, seemingly insignificant until time does the math. If a creature adds only 0.5 millimeters per year, over 200 years that becomes 100 millimeters, 10 centimeters, the width of a human hand. For species with elongating bodies, such as ribbon worms or sea spiders, this is a recipe for extraordinary size. These animals did not grow large suddenly. They grew large inevitably. Species that touch centuries. Some creatures in Antarctica may outlive entire civilizations. Sponges, the architects of deep time. Certain Antarctic sponges grow so slowly that scientists estimate their ages in centuries. Some may even stretch close to 1,000 years. Their bodies resemble frozen pillars rising from the seafloor, quietly filtering water decade after decade. A sponge does not rush to rebuild. It does not hurry to expand, but given endless time, it rises into a giant. Sea stars, living decades in the cold. Many Antarctic starfish live 20, 30, even 40 years. Their growth is slow, their tissues dense, their metabolism minimal. Over a human lifetime, a starfish may only double in size, but doubled at Antarctic scale brings them to forms almost unthinkable elsewhere. Amphipods, tiny creatures with long lives. Warm water amphipods live months. Antarctic amphipods live years, sometimes more than a decade. A decade for a tiny crustacean is an eternity. It allows for continuous small increments of growth that eventually yield creatures multiple times larger than their tropical cousins. Sea spiders. Time-stretched limbs. The limbs of Antarctic sea spiders grow slowly, but they never stop. Over decades, their legs can reach astonishing spans, delicate, elongated structures that reflect the patience of their world. Ribbon worms. Long life, long bodies. Some Antarctic ribbon worms may live for 30 years or more. Their bodies elongate gradually over time, allowing them to reach meter-long sizes that would be impossible in warm seas. Antarctica doesn't just slow life, it lengthens it. Why long life is especially beneficial in Antarctica. 3 forces make longevity uniquely advantageous here. 1. Survival through harsh seasons. The long, dark winter would kill fast-living species. Slow-living, energy-efficient species endure. 2. Reduced predation. When nothing hunts you quickly, you can afford to grow slowly and steadily. 3. Stability over millennia. The Southern Ocean has remained cold and isolated for tens of millions of years. This stability gives long-lived species an evolutionary home where their strategies work for vast stretches of time. Long life becomes more than an adaptation. It becomes an inheritance. The deep shelf, a repository of elders. Far below the ice lies the Antarctic deep shelf, a world where light never reaches, where ancient sponges and corals cling to the seafloor like old trees growing in darkness. Here, longevity dominates. Scientists using radioactive isotopes have measured the growth of some deep-water organisms and found they grow millimeters per decade, yet they stand several meters tall. That means they have lived through entire glacial cycles, through changes in Earth's orbit, through climate oscillations no human has ever seen, possibly through the rise and fall of entire species. These organisms are not just old, they are living history books. Each layer of their body is a page, each year a new line of text, each century a chapter, and time has written them into giants. The paradox of fragility and longevity. Antarctic giants often look fragile, thin legs, delicate tentacles, soft bodies, yet they endure for astonishing lengths of time. How can something so delicate live so long? The answer: nothing breaks them. No fast predators, no storms beneath the ice, no big temperature swings, no invasive warm water species, no sudden loss of oxygen, no rapid competition pressure. Antarctica is harsh in climate, but gentle in disturbance. Fragility can survive if the world is calm, and fragility can grow large if the world is calm for a long time. This is the paradox at the heart of Antarctic gigantism. The strongest creatures are the slowest ones. The largest are the most fragile. The survivors are those who do not rush. Growth as a form of memory. Perhaps the most poetic truth about longevity in Antarctica is that growth becomes memory. A sea sponge's layers are records of centuries of water chemistry. A sea spider's limbs reflect seasons of abundance and scarcity. A worm's length carries the imprint of decades spent in stable cold. Every centimeter of an Antarctic giant is a timestamp. Most ecosystems erase their past rapidly. Antarctica preserves it in living form, leaving the elders of the ice behind. As we drift away from these ancient beings, sponges that grew like slow mountains, worms that stretched through decades, sea spiders walking on the long timeline of cold, we realize that Antarctica's giants are not products of abundance or power. They are products of time. Time allowed by oxygen, time stretched by cold, time untroubled by predators, time uninterrupted by change. Gigantism here is a long conversation between life and stability. In part 19, we descend again into the deep Antarctic shelf, exploring the hidden world where many of these long-lived giants found refuge during ice ages, and where some of the planet's strangest creatures still thrive. Beneath the cold surface waters, beneath the dim blue twilight where jellyfish pulse like drifting moons, beneath even the long slopes of sediment where amphipods and ribbon worms wander, there is another world, a world darker, a world older, a world shaped not by the gentle rhythm of drifting giants, but by the deep, ancient weight of the ocean itself. This is Antarctica's deep shelf, a region unlike any other on Earth. Here, the seafloor plunges not into the abyss of the open ocean, but into broad, cold plateaus sculpted over millions of years by advancing and retreating ice. It is a landscape defined by slow stability, dark, quiet, nearly untouched by the storms or turbulence of the surface world. If the shallow Antarctic waters feel dreamlike, the deep shelf feels ancient, not dead, never dead, but solemn, measured, a cathedral of time and pressure. Tonight, we descend into this submerged plateau to meet the creatures that live on its silent floor, long-lived, slow-growing organisms that seem to exist outside the normal rules of biology. A landscape carved by ice. To understand the deep shelf, you must picture how Antarctica's glaciers behave. For millions of years, the ice sheets advanced and retreated across the continent like enormous, grinding tides. As they moved, They scraped enormous valleys, carved basins, and left behind fractured ridges. When the ice retreated, these sculpted depressions flooded with seawater, creating underwater plains hundreds of meters deep. These submerged plateaus flat, cold, stable became hidden refuges during harsh glacial periods. Creatures unable to survive being crushed under advancing ice retreated into these deeper pockets. And because these refuges persisted across multiple ice ages, they became places where ancient lineages survived unbroken, untouched, evolving in slow-motion isolation. The deep shelf is not merely a habitat, it is a sanctuary carved by time, a world without sunlight, but not without life. Light disappears quickly as we descend. 20 meters down, the world grows dim. 50 meters, darker still. 100 meters, the last glimmers vanish. By the time we reach the deep shelf 200, 300, 500 meters beneath the surface, we have fully entered a world without sunlight. Yet it is not empty. It is full, rich, alive. The seafloor here is covered in sprawling gardens of sponges towering like pale monuments, bryozoans forming delicate, lace-like colonies, sea cucumbers inching across sediment in slow arcs, polychaete worms weaving through sand, basket stars folding and unfolding arms like marine origami, corals and gorgonians growing in slow spirals. This is not the barren deep sea seen in much of the world. Antarctica's deep shelf is a cold-water rainforest dense, intricate, quietly thriving. The dominance of sponges. Among the most striking giants of the deep shelf are the sponges. Some rise more than a meter high, forming structures that resemble frozen trees or stone pillars. Their bodies are porous architectures, water filters engineered by evolution to move gallons of seawater through their tissues each day. But the most astonishing fact about these sponges isn't their size, it's their age. Some Antarctic sponges may be hundreds or even thousands of years old. They grow so slowly, millimeters per decade, that their massive forms represent centuries of uninterrupted life. Each layer of their body is a century, each pore a testament to survival in a world of deep time stillness. They are the elders of the Antarctic, filter feeders in a world of slow food. You might wonder, how does such a cold, dark world sustain so much life? The answer is in the slow fall of organic matter from the upper layers marine snow drifting down like perpetual winter ash. In the warm ocean, marine snow falls quickly, leaving little time for deep organisms to intercept it. In Antarctica, cold water slows its descent. Flakes drift for days. Tiny particles hang suspended in the water. Nutrients reach the deep shelf gradually. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is wasted. This gives sponges, bryozoans, and filter feeders a steady but slow supply of food. Their survival depends not on abundance, but on consistency. In this world, slowness becomes energy efficiency. Creatures that move like thought. Movement in the deep shelf is different. Everything seems slowed not just by cold, but by intention. Sea cucumbers stretch their transparent bodies in careful, deliberate patterns. Worms weave through sediment like sluggish handwriting. Basket stars open their fractal arms wide, filtering drifting particles with mesmerizing calm. These creatures do not rush, because rushing wastes energy, and energy here is precious. Instead, movement is a negotiation, a choreography of minimal effort, a dance written by evolution to match the available energy. Even predators like certain slow-moving sea stars hunt in time frames that feel geological rather than biological. A sea star might take hours to envelop its prey, sometimes days. It is a world where urgency has no meaning. Refuges of ancient lineages. The deep shelf is not only a habitat, It is a kind of evolutionary museum. Species survive here that have vanished elsewhere. Lineages persist that once thrived globally. Traits remain that feel prehistoric. Why? Because the deep shelf is the perfect refuge. Temperature stable, oxygen high, predators few, habitats persistent, ice unable to reach, isolation profound. Life here was never reset by massive ecological upheaval. It simply continued, slowly, patiently, unbroken through time. Some scientists believe that deep shelf habitats sheltered life during catastrophic events like global glaciations, when much of the rest of the world became inhospitable. The creatures we see here may be direct descendants of species that survived the most extreme episodes in Earth's history. Antarctica's deep shelf isn't just old, it is ancient. Gigantism down in the dark. Large sizes persist here because cold slows decay. Long life allows decades of growth. Low predation removes pressure to stay small. Buoyant cold water supports soft bodies. Slow, consistent food supply sustains long-lived giants. Some of the most surprising giants live here. Amphipods even larger than those in shallower water. Sea spiders with limbs extending like drifting twigs. Massive sponges anchoring the seafloor like pale towers. Giant isopods creeping across sediment like armored ghosts. This is the Antarctic story distilled. When disturbance fades, size accumulates, leaving the depths. As we ascend from the deep shelf, leaving behind the towering sponges, the drifting basket stars, the ancient worms, we carry with us a deeper understanding of the Antarctic mosaic. Gigantism is not a single mystery. It is woven from many threads. Oxygen, cold, stability, deep time, seasonal cycles, low predation, deep shelf refuges. Together, they form a world where life is shaped not by speed or competition, but by patience. If the giants of Antarctica appear quiet and deliberate, the forces that sustain them are even quieter. They are invisible microscopic threads in a web stretching from the smallest particle of dust to the largest whale on Earth. Tonight, we explore one of the most underestimated forces shaping the Southern Ocean. Iron, a trace element so rare in seawater, it might as well be cosmic dust, yet so essential that without it, the Antarctic would be barren. Iron, drifting through ice and current, fuels the most important biological engine on the planet, the phytoplankton bloom. And from that bloom flows everything we've encountered: krill, worms, sea spiders, amphipods, fish, jellyfish giants, and even blue whales. This is the story of how a frozen continent, through ice, rock, and deep ocean motion, feeds entire worlds. Why iron matters in a place so rich in life. At first, it seems impossible that iron, a metal, could dictate the fate of Antarctic ecosystems. Yet plant life in the ocean needs more than sunlight and carbon dioxide. It needs nutrients, and among them, iron is a limiting factor. Phytoplankton cannot photosynthesize at scale without iron, and without phytoplankton, nothing else survives. This is why iron is called a micronutrient with macroscopic impact. A few atoms of iron per billion molecules of seawater can make the difference between a barren ocean and one of Earth's most productive ecosystems. The Southern Ocean is rich in nitrogen, silica, carbon, phosphorus, oxygen, but it is famously poor in iron. Yet somehow, Antarctica produces some of the largest seasonal blooms anywhere on Earth. Why? Because the frozen continent itself becomes a massive iron distribution system, ice as an iron vault. Antarctic sea ice locks away particles of iron, iron-rich dust blown from the continent, fragments of glacial sediment, microscopic mineral grains, organic material embedded by freezing water. This iron remains sealed in the ice for the duration of the winter. Then, when spring arrives and sunlight returns, the ice begins to melt. That melt doesn't simply release water, it releases iron. As meltwater trickles into the ocean, a pulse of iron diffuses outward into the upper layers, stimulating phytoplankton growth in a sudden, explosive bloom. The ice has become a bank account, one that accumulates iron in winter and pays it out in spring. This seasonal release is the spark that ignites the Antarctic food web every year. Glaciers, ancient iron reservoirs. Not all iron comes from sea ice. Glaciers' vast, grinding rivers of ancient snow also play a role. As glaciers scrape across rock, they grind minerals into fine powder. This dust becomes embedded within the ice. When the edges of glaciers calve into the sea, they drop icebergs full of iron minerals, rock flour, sediment particles, organic debris. As the icebergs drift and melt, they disperse iron across enormous distances. Some icebergs have been tracked, delivering nutrients hundreds of kilometers from their origin. They act like wandering fertilizer barges, silent, slow, and essential. In a world limited by iron, every melting iceberg becomes a catalyst for life. The Great Upwelling. There is another source of iron, one hidden in the deep. Antarctica is one of the few places on Earth where deep, nutrient-rich waters rise naturally to the surface. This upwelling carries iron that has sunk into the deep ocean from decaying marine snow, decomposed organic matter, sediment runoff, ancient deposits on the seafloor. Upwelling occurs due to the powerful motion of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, ACC, which stirs the deep ocean in slow, vast spirals. Cold, oxygen-rich, nutrient-laden water rises to the surface, creating a conveyor belt of nourishment. In most oceans, upwelling is sporadic. In Antarctica, it is constant, woven into the continent's identity. Together, ice melt plus glacial dust plus upwelling create a perfect combination. Iron arrives, light returns, phytoplankton bloom, life awakens. The bloom that feeds the world. Once iron becomes available, the transformation begins. Phytoplankton, microscopic algae, multiply with extraordinary speed, turning the water green. These blooms absorb vast quantities of carbon dioxide, produce oxygen, form the base of the food web, feed krill and zooplankton in staggering numbers. Krill, in turn, feed penguins, seals, whales, fish, invertebrates. Thousands of species depend on this bloom, directly or indirectly. Even creatures we saw in the deep, like sponges, worms, and starfish, depend on drifting particles from the surface bloom. The deep shelf eats the leftovers. A simple element, iron, triggers a chain reaction that sustains giants at every level. Why iron is so scarce. Iron enters the ocean through sediment, dust, rock, melting ice, but it is easily removed. In oxygen-rich waters like Antarctica, iron oxidizes and sinks quickly, sometimes within hours. In other places, rivers replenish iron constantly, but Antarctica has no rivers. Its fresh water remains locked in ice. This means iron persists long enough only when it is embedded in sea ice, trapped in iceberg fragments, brought up by deep currents. The Southern Ocean is both rich and poor, rich in everything except the one thing phytoplankton need most. That tension gives rise to an ecosystem built on rare pulses, not constant abundance. It is this scarcity and release cycle that shapes the entire web. Iron and gigantism. At first, iron might seem unrelated to giant amphipods or meter-long worms, but everything loops back. Without iron, no bloom. Without bloom, no krill or zooplankton explosion. Without zooplankton, no slow, steady marine snow. Without marine snow, deep shelf giants starve. Without shallow abundance, amphipods cannot accumulate mass. Without krill, whales cannot survive. Without algae from ice melt, the entire chain collapses. Antarctic gigantism depends not on continuous plenty, but on rhythmic pulses of abundance. Each bloom fuels months of slow feeding and years of accumulated growth. Iron is the spark. Gigantism is the echo. The whale in the equation. The largest animal on Earth. The blue whale feeds almost entirely on krill. A creature weighing 150 tons thrives because tiny algae absorb iron from melting ice. A dust grain becomes a cell becomes a bloom becomes a krill swarm, a swarm becomes a whale's feast. Antarctica reminds us that giants are always tethered to the smallest things, a perfect engine powered by fragility. This iron-driven system is elegant but fragile. If warming reduces ice formation, iron storage declines. If rivers remain absent, no new sources emerge. If melting becomes too intense, stratification changes. If the ACC shifts, upwelling weakens. If warm water enters, the bloom falters. The giants we've met, sea spiders, amphipods, jellyfish, worms, are not only shaped by physical forces, but by the chemical choreography of a delicate system. The simplest molecule of iron can sustain life that spans kilometers. Antarctica's giants exist because the ocean is fed tiny doses of metal dust each year. We have walked the seafloor with amphipods big enough to cradle in 2 hands. We have watched sea spiders extend their glass-like limbs into the dim blue. We have traced the endless lines of ribbon worms, followed jellyfish tentacles disappearing into the dark, and drifted past sponges older than entire civilizations. We've stood beneath frozen ceilings. We've descended into deep refuges. We've traveled millions of years of climate cycles. We've explored cold, oxygen, stillness, darkness, time, and the chemistry of iron. Now, at last, it is time to weave the threads into a single tapestry, a picture that reveals why gigantism thrives here and almost nowhere else. This is the Antarctic equation, a sum of forces so interwoven that none alone can explain the giants we've encountered, but all together create a world unlike any other on Earth. Let us bring the pieces together. 1. Cold, the slowing of time. Cold water lies at the foundation of everything. It slows metabolism. It reduces the demand for food. It preserves tissues. It stabilizes chemistry. Slow metabolism plus long life equals potential for growth across decades. Cold also increases density, giving buoyancy to fragile creatures. It supports large, soft bodies. It enables long, thin shapes that would collapse in warm water. Cold is not just a temperature. It is an architecture. 2. Oxygen, the breath that makes size possible. Cold water holds enormous amounts of dissolved oxygen. Species that breathe through diffusion, not lungs, not gills, can grow larger simply because more oxygen is available per square centimeter of body surface. Sea spiders can stretch their limbs. Amphipods can expand their bodies. Worms can lengthen beyond expectations. Oxygen acts like a quiet abundance, a chemical permission slip for size. In warm water, these giants would suffocate. In cold water, they thrive. 3. Stillness, the protector of fragility. The sea ice creates an environment nearly free from turbulence. No violent currents, no storm surges, no sudden mixing, no waves ripping fragile forms apart. Delicate tentacles survive. Glass-like limbs endure. Soft bodies remain unbroken. Stillness doesn't simply prevent harm. It encourages fragility to evolve into beauty. In this calm environment, evolution can explore shapes that elsewhere would be torn apart in minutes. 4. Stability, the repetition of calm. Antarctica is not just cold, it is consistently cold. Temperatures rarely shift. Seasons are predictable. The environment is stable over millennia. Stability is the rarest gift in evolution. Elsewhere, change crushes fragile body plans. In Antarctica, fragile body plans persist. This stability fosters long-term survival for ancient lineages, allowing traits perfected over millions of years to thrive. 5. Isolation, the absence of speed. The Antarctic circumpolar current acts as a barrier, a liquid wall keeping warm water predators out and resident species in. Sharks cannot cross. Fast predators cannot enter. Warm water competitors remain far away. With rapid predation absent, small species no longer need to remain small. Delicate species no longer need armor. Slow species no longer need speed. Evolution drifts. Drift becomes possibility. Possibility becomes giant. 6. Deep time rhythms. Ice ages as sculptors. Glacial cycles repeatedly erased shallow ecosystems. Only species that could retreat to deeper refuges survived. The survivors were slow-growing, long-lived, energy-efficient, tolerant of cold, resilient to change. These traits became the baseline for Antarctic life. Each ice age filtered the ecosystem further, favoring organisms whose biology matched the continent's deep cycles. Gigantism is the inheritance of survivors. 7. Feast and famine, the seasonal pulse. Antarctica is a land of extremes. Months of darkness, nothing grows. Days of endless light, everything grows. This cycle favors large, slow-growing creatures because large bodies store energy. Slow metabolism stretches reserves. Long lifespans smooth over seasonal hardship. A short feast becomes nourishment for a long winter. A long life becomes the canvas on which size slowly accumulates. 8. Nutrient cycles, the gift of iron. Iron fuels phytoplankton. Phytoplankton fuel krill. Krill fuel whales and everything in between. Glacial dust, ice melt, and deep upwelling deliver iron into the surface water each spring, creating blooms so vast they feed the world's largest animals. The giants we see are built from the smallest particles imaginable, iron atoms drifting out of melting ice. Antarctica's abundance is a paradox born of scarcity. 9. Buoyancy, the invisible scaffold. Cold, dense water supports bodies that elsewhere would collapse. Tentacles remain suspended. Soft worms hold their shape. Sponges grow meter-tall structures. Sea spiders walk as if weightless. Without buoyancy, Antarctic gigantism would remain theory. With buoyancy, it becomes reality. The water here is not just habitat, it is scaffolding. 10. Time, the final ingredient. Above all else, Antarctica offers time. Time measured not in years or decades, but in cycles. Cycles of ice, cycles of light, cycles of bloom, cycles of deep calm. Time allows slow growth. Time allows resilience. Time allows fragility to persist. Time allows giants to accumulate mass molecule by molecule, season by season. Time is the quiet sculptor behind every extraordinary creature we've met. The Antarctic equation. Bring all these forces together, and you get a living equation. Gigantism equals cold plus oxygen plus buoyancy plus stability plus stillness plus low predation plus seasonal pulses plus deep time cycles plus iron nutrients plus longevity. No single factor is enough, but together They create a world where life stretches itself into improbable forms, slow, elegant, vast, fragile, ancient. Antarctica is not a place where giants survive. It is a place where giants are inevitable, a world held together by quiet forces. As we rise from the seafloor one last time, drifting through the calm water past the glowing jellyfish and patient amphipods, we begin to see the Southern Ocean not as an anomaly, but as a masterpiece, a symphony of physics, a cathedral of cold, a laboratory built from time, a cradle for slow wonder. Our journey through the Southern Ocean has taken us from the underside of ancient ice to the deep, silent plateaus carved by glaciers. We have followed delicate giants through calm waters, traced the rise of life fed by iron dust, and listened to the quiet tempo of organisms that grow not in years, but in centuries. Now, as we gather the final threads of this story, we must stop looking at Antarctica only as a place and begin seeing it as a teacher, because in this frozen kingdom, life follows rules written nowhere else on Earth. Rules that reveal how living systems evolve when time stretches, disturbance fades, and the smallest forces shape the largest bodies. Tonight, we step back from the creatures themselves and reflect on the principles they embody, principles that echo far beyond Antarctica. Lesson 1. Fragility thrives when the world is gentle. In most ecosystems, fragility is punished. A glass-like limb snaps, a slow-moving worm is eaten, a jellyfish with long threads is torn by currents. Vulnerability becomes a liability. But Antarctica turns this logic on its head. Here, water is calm, predators are slow, temperatures are stable, storms barely touch the world beneath the ice. The result is extraordinary. Fragility becomes viable, and once viable, fragility becomes evolution's playground. Creatures here are delicate not because they failed to become strong, but because the world allowed delicate strategies to flourish. Antarctica teaches us that strength is not always the winning trait. Sometimes, gentleness creates a different kind of success. Lesson 2. Time is a better sculptor than force. In warm oceans, evolution is fast, competition is fierce, predators strike quickly. The pace demands rapid change. Shapes evolve, sharpen, harden, but in Antarctica, evolution stretches across slow-moving centuries. A sponge adds a few millimeters. A worm lengthens over decades. A sea spider grows its limbs like patient architecture. A giant jellyfish extends another meter of tentacle. No rush, no crisis, no collapse. Given sufficient time and without interruption, life will explore forms that appear impossible elsewhere. Antarctica teaches us that many wonders are not born from intensity, but from patience. Lesson 3. Scarcity can be creative. Most people imagine scarcity as destructive. A lack of resources leads to competition, to collapse, to desperation. But in Antarctica, scarcity takes a different shape. It becomes a rhythm. Months of famine, weeks of abundance, long winters, brief summers. Life has adapted not to abundance, but to cycles of deprivation. Creatures do not grow fast. They endure slowly. They store energy. They wait. They become efficient. Scarcity has sculpted bodies capable of surviving long stretches of nothingness. It has rewarded slow strategies, large energy reserves, and patient metabolisms. Antarctica teaches us that scarcity, when predictable, can drive innovation, not destruction. Lesson 4. Isolation protects diversity. Isolation is often seen as a limitation, a barrier, a confinement. Yet Antarctica demonstrates that isolation can also be protection. Cut off by the Antarctic circumpolar current, this ocean became a sanctuary where, Predators could not invade. Diseases rarely spread. Warm water species could not outcompete slow, cold-adapted creatures. Ancient lineages could persist unchanged. Isolation preserved opportunities for life that would have vanished elsewhere. Antarctica teaches us that separation can sometimes be the key to survival. Lesson 5. The smallest things sustain the largest. Every giant in Antarctica, amphipods, worms, sea spiders, sponges, jellyfish, whales, is built on the foundation of microscopic life. Tiny algae beneath the ice, nanogram shards of iron, floating particles of marine snow. The whales do not eat blooms directly, but they devour the krill that rise from them. The giant worms do not feed on ice algae, but they eat the layers of drifting organic material that settle from above. The ancient sponges filter the slow descent of particles sparked by iron-rich meltwater. The entire system, from the smallest cell to the largest creature on Earth, is sustained by the chemistry of dust and ice. Antarctica teaches us that scale is misleading. The smallest elements often shape the largest forms. Lesson 6. Stability can be more valuable than growth. In much of the world, ecosystems succeed through rapid change, rapid reproduction, rapid innovation. But success here is measured differently. Did you endure the winter? Did you survive 10 winters? Did your lineage survive 1 million winters? Stability, not speed, is the currency. Antarctica teaches us that progress is not always measured in acceleration. Sometimes, survival itself is the greatest triumph. Lesson 7. Beauty emerges from unlikely conditions. To an outside observer, Antarctica appears hostile, frozen, empty, bleak, lifeless. Yet beneath the ice lies one of Earth's richest, most vibrant, most ancient ecosystems. A world of glowing jellyfish, cathedral-like sponges, shimmering worms, and forests of lace-like bryozoans. This world exists not despite the cold, but because of it. Antarctica teaches us that beauty often resides where we least expect it. Lesson 8. Giants grow in places that don't break them. The giants of Antarctica are not built by abundance or aggression. They grow large because nothing interrupts them. No fast predators, no violent currents, no destructive heat waves, no invasive competitors, no sudden collapses in habitat. A giant needs space not only to grow, but to remain intact. Antarctica teaches us that growth without interruption becomes grandeur. Lesson 9. Fragile worlds require balance. All the forces that create Antarctic giants, cold, stability, stillness, seasonal blooms, deep time refuges, are delicately balanced. Warm the water a few degrees, and oxygen levels drop. Reduce ice, and iron storage collapses. Introduce turbulence, and fragile limbs break. Allow warm water predators to enter, and slow strategies fail. Disturb glacial rhythms, and deep refuges weaken. Antarctica is resilient in time, but delicate in structure. It teaches us that even the strongest seeming giants are tethered to fragile systems. Lesson 10. Wonder grows where time slows. Antarctica is a place where everything we assume about life speed, competition, constant change is reversed. Here, slow is powerful. Fragile is viable. Ancient is present. Small is foundational. Cold is creative. The giants we've met are not monsters or anomalies. They are the natural outcome of a world where time slows into a long, patient breath. Antarctica teaches us that wonder does not emerge from chaos, but from quiet, leaving the lessons behind. As we drift upward through the final layers of water, toward the dim glow of the ice, toward the surface, toward the light, we carry with us not just observations, but insights. Antarctica is not simply a frozen ecosystem, it is a living philosophy, a demonstration of what life becomes when given time, calm, and consistency. We have spent this journey drifting through a world most people will never see, a world of slow pulses, ancient bodies, and quiet giants, a world where cold becomes a sculptor, where time becomes a collaborator, where fragility becomes a successful design. Tonight, as we rise for the final time toward the dim ceiling of Antarctic ice, we turn back for one last look at the creatures that live in this frozen kingdom and the forces that shape them. This is not just a conclusion, it is a farewell to the stillness, to the slowness, to the deep whispers of the Southern Ocean. The water grows lighter, the currents calmer, the silhouettes fade beneath us. But the lessons remain, the silence that held an entire world. Down here, silence is not emptiness. It is structure. It is architecture. It is the physical condition that allowed this ecosystem to exist at all. When we first met, the Antarctic giants, amphipods the size of walnuts, worms longer than arms, sea spiders with spindly legs, jellyfish trailing ribbons into the dark, it was easy to see them as outliers, curiosities, evolutionary accidents. But the silence around them revealed something different. Their size was not anomaly. It was a language written into the water itself. Cold water slows, cold water holds, cold water steadies, cold water preserves. In silence, fragility is allowed to persist. In persistence, fragility becomes form. In form, giants emerge. Antarctica's stillness is not passive. It is active, shaping life with the gentleness of glaciers and the patience of centuries. A world built from small forces. In most ecosystems, large forces dominate. Volcanoes, storms, predators, competition, heat. But here, the architects are tiny. Microscopic algae, drifting iron dust, slow-falling marine snow, molecules of oxygen held in cold water, minute changes in light through frozen ceilings. These small forces, repeating over millions of years, assembled giants as surely as tectonic plates build mountains. The paradox is clear. Antarctica's giants, the worms, the sponges, the sea spiders, the amphipods, the jellyfish, are the children of microscopic processes. A dust grain becomes a bloom becomes a food web becomes an ocean of giants. Life here is built from whispers, not shouts. Why the giants feel so ancient? As we look down into the fading blue, it becomes obvious why everything here feels prehistoric. The Southern Ocean is not simply cold, it is old. Not in years, but in unchangedness. Where tropical reefs crash and rebuild with every storm, Antarctica remains steady. Where temperate waters shift each season, Antarctica repeats its rhythm with glacial patience. Where predators in other seas drive constant evolution, Antarctica's isolation removes the urgency of change. The result is life that looks familiar not to modern eyes, but to ancient ones. Creatures here resemble forms that lived hundreds of millions of years ago, sponges shaped like Cambrian fossils, sea spiders echoing Paleozoic arthropods, giant worms reminiscent of early marine ecosystems, jellyfish drifting like primordial ghosts. In Antarctica, evolution did not freeze. It slowed, held, and deepened. The giants beneath the ice are not relics. They are continuations, a symphony played in slow motion. If music is defined by rhythm, then Antarctica is a symphony played at a tempo so slow that each movement feels like a geological chapter. Every pulse of a jellyfish bell is a measure. Every decade of sponge growth is a phrase. Every ice age is a movement. Every iron pulse is a crescendo. And each creature we have met plays its part. Amphipods, plucking nutrients from the bloom, sponges, filtering the quiet rain of marine snow, ribbon worms, carving long lines through sediment, sea spiders, stepping lightly across a world of cold glass, jellyfish, draping silken threads into eternity. Together, they are not random forms. They are the song of Antarctica itself, slow, spacious, resonant, ancient, a fragile future. The last decades have shown how sensitive Antarctica truly is. A few degrees of warming changes, oxygen levels, sea ice thickness, predator boundaries, iron storage in ice, bloom timing, water density, stability of refuges. In a world built on delicate conditions, even slight disruptions ripple outward. Warm waters from lower latitudes penetrate deeper each year. Ice shelves thin, currents shift, krill decline in some regions. Predators probe farther south. The Antarctic giants do not fear predators or storms, they fear instability. A fragile system does not collapse from one problem. It collapses when harmony breaks. We may be witnessing the early tremors of that break. What the giants ask of us. As we approach the surface, we ask a final question. What do these creatures, these slow, ancient giants teach us, not just about biology or evolution, but about ourselves? Perhaps they teach us that beauty can emerge from patience, that fragility deserves protection, that the smallest forces can shape the biggest outcomes, that a world without haste can produce wonders impossible anywhere else, that survival does not always look like strength, that time is not the enemy of life, but one of its greatest allies. Most of all, they teach us humility, because the giants of Antarctica are not loud, they are not aggressive, they are not powerful in the ways we usually measure power. They endure, they persist, they grow in the cold, slow, quiet. They follow rhythms older than mountains. They teach us that life is largest when it is given room to unfold gently. They show us that wonder is not scarce. It is patient, breaking the surface. At last, we rise to the base of the frozen ceiling, the underside of the sea ice. The light diffuses through it like milk glass. Small algae cling to its lower surface. Tiny amphipods drift in the filtered glow. And then, with one final push, we break through. The world above is blinding. Wind howls across the ice. The horizon stretches in white lines and blue shadows. But below us, down in the quiet, cold layers remains everything we have seen. A world shaped by slow water. A world held together by balance. A world filled with fragile giants that live in ways we are only beginning to understand. And as we breathe the cold air above the ice, we realize something profound. Antarctica is not remote. It is not empty. It is not inhospitable. It is alive. It is delicate. It is irreplaceable. And below its frozen surface lies one of the most extraordinary ecosystems on Earth, a reminder that the quietest places often hold the greatest secrets. Breaking through the sea ice feels like leaving one planet and arriving on another. Below, everything was blue and silent, shaped by slow rhythms, drifting giants and ancient beings moving through darkness. Above, the world explodes into stark white and restless wind. Light scatters across ice fields. Cold air bites at the skin. The horizon stretches unbroken for miles, interrupted only by ridges of snow and the jagged glow of distant icebergs. It is hard to imagine that both worlds' quiet ocean and fierce atmosphere are part of the same place. Yet they depend on each other completely. Antarctica is a system, not a landscape. A single breath connects the depths to the open air. Tonight, we step into that surface world, not to leave the giants behind, but to understand how the ice above shapes the life below. Because the story of Antarctic gigantism does not end underwater. It extends into the physics of the ice itself, the movement of the wind, the chemistry of snowflakes, and the migration of animals that live at the fragile boundary between water and air. This is where the ocean touches the sky. And here, too, the world moves slowly. The ice sheet, a continent made of frozen water. Antarctica is the coldest, driest, windiest continent on Earth. Yet at its heart lies something deceptively simple: frozen water. Trillions of tons of it, layer upon layer of compressed ice, glaciers that move with the patience of centuries, shelves that stretch far into the sea before breaking into icebergs. This massive ice system shapes the Southern Ocean in several critical ways. 1. Sea ice regulates temperature. Each year, thousands of square kilometers freeze and melt in a predictable cycle-locking warmth in winter, releasing cold freshwater in summer. 2. Glaciers provide nutrients. Rock flour trapped inside ice feeds the ocean when meltwater trickles down. 3. Ice shelves stabilize currents. Their weight and shape influence water circulation, guiding the powerful Antarctic circumpolar current. 4. Ice controls the rhythm of light. The thickness of the ice determines how much sunlight reaches the upper ocean. Too thick, and the world below plunges into darkness. Too thin, and blooms erupt early. The ice is not just a barrier, it is the conductor of a vast ecological symphony, where sea and air exchange life. Standing above an opening in the ice, one of the ocean's breathing holes, you begin to feel how alive the boundary between water and sky is. Penguins launch themselves out of the water in bursts. Seals glide beneath the surface, surfacing briefly for air before vanishing again. Skua birds circle above, watching for opportunities to steal a meal. Even the air smells different here, rich with the scent of salt, krill, and deep ocean. This zone, known as the ecotone, is the meeting point of two worlds: the marine world of slow giants, the aerial world of swift hunters, the frozen world of ice, the dynamic world of wind. It is a place where predators re-enter the equation. Not the fast fish that chase amphipods in warm seas, but animals evolved specifically to hunt in extreme cold. Penguins' torpedo-shaped bodies, built for efficiency. Leopards, seals sharp, swift, and sleek. Orcas intelligent, coordinated, capable of taking on prey far larger than themselves. Here, speed returns. Here, the ocean's calm gives way to bursts of motion, but even these predators cannot penetrate the deep stability we saw beneath the ice. They hunt in the shallows and upper layers, leaving the giants in deeper calm. The surface world adds drama, but it does not erase the peace below. The breath of the continent, winds that shape oceans. Antarctica's winds are legendary. They whip across the ice at hurricane speeds, sculpting snow into razor-sharp ridges called sastrugi. They push sea ice into vast colliding patterns. They drive currents that influence global climate. These winds, born from the temperature contrast between cold land and less cold ocean, play a hidden role in sustaining life. They move icebergs, transporting iron-rich sediment into open water. They crack the ice, creating openings for marine mammals to breathe. They drive the mixing of surface waters, dispersing nutrients. They guide migrating birds, which cross thousands of kilometers to feed on Antarctic blooms. Wind is the unseen hand that connects atmosphere to sea. It touches everything, even the ancient giants hundreds of meters below. Icebergs, drifting mountains that feed the ocean. To humans, icebergs are hazards, floating walls of white that threaten ships. But to Antarctica, icebergs are fertile machines. As they melt, they release iron, silica, organic debris. mineral dust. These nutrients spark blooms in their wake-long trails of green stretching across the water. Marine biologists call these trails plumes of life, and indeed, they are. Whales often feed along them. Krill swarm within them. Even giant amphipods feel the downstream effects, months or years later, through the drifting marine snow that eventually sinks. An iceberg is not a block of frozen freshwater. It is a slow-motion fertilizer barge. Its impact does not last days. It lasts seasons, and sometimes lifetimes. Animals that live at the borderline. Some creatures make the boundary between ice and water their permanent home. Emperor penguins. They breed on ice shelves. They dive hundreds of meters to chase fish and squid. They rely on sea ice thickness for safe nesting. Weddell seals. They maintain breathing holes in the ice using their teeth. Their pups learn to swim in sheltered under-ice chambers. Orcas. Some orca families use coordinated waves to wash seals off ice floes. Others specialize entirely in hunting beneath the ice edge. Snow petrels. They nest in icy cliffs, feeding on fish drawn to the rich waters below. These animals move in and out of the oceanic world we explored, sometimes diving into the same waters as giant amphipods and sea spiders, sometimes crossing into regions where even the giants dare not go. They connect the deep to the air, reflections on the transition between worlds. As we stand on the ice, feeling its immensity beneath our feet, the ocean below seems impossibly distant and yet intimately connected. Every gust of wind, every snowflake, every meltwater droplet, every beam of sunlight, every sliding glacier, every drifting iceberg plays a part in shaping the world beneath the ice. Antarctica is not a system of separate realms. It is a single organism made of frozen water and living tissue, of slow giants and fast predators, of deep calm and surface chaos. The creatures below do not live apart from the ice above, they live because of it. Alas, look back at the sea below. Before we leave this continent of frozen wonder, imagine one last descent, down through the crack in the ice, through layers of soft blue light, past drifting algae, past the first jellyfish, into the dim calm, toward the ribbon worms, the ancient sponges, the patient amphipods, the seafloor shaped by centuries. This is the hidden world we've explored, a world shaped by forces, subtle and grand, violent and still, ancient and ongoing, a world where giants are not rare, they are expected, a world where time is slow, where life is delicate, where evolution paints with a softer brush, a world that exists nowhere else on Earth. The wind settles, the sky dims, the vast white plains of Antarctica stretch endlessly in every direction, lit by a soft, low sun that seems to hover just above the horizon, never rising, never fully setting. Up here, the world is silent in a way that feels almost sacred. But beneath us, past the ice and the blue shadows and the frozen crust, lies the ocean that has shaped our entire journey, the ocean of giants, the ocean of slowness, the ocean of time. Tonight, we close our expedition with a final reflection, one that belongs not to science alone, nor to storytelling alone, but to the place where both meet, the human desire to understand the mysteries that lie beneath the surface. Because Antarctica is more than an ecosystem. It is a reminder, a teacher, a quiet mirror held up to our restless world, what we leave behind and what we carry forward. In most places on Earth, life is loud, fast, dramatic, chaotic. Predators chase, storms reshape coastlines, ecosystems flash and flicker like fire. But the Southern Ocean is different. It is a place where the rules are turned upside down, where cold creates abundance, where stability shapes evolution, where fragility becomes resilience. where time becomes growth, where the smallest particles feed the largest animals, where giants drift through still water like slow-moving constellations. We leave behind these creatures now, the amphipods wandering like armored explorers, the sea spiders stepping across the seafloor on glass thread legs, the ancient sponges rising in pale towers, the ribbon worms curled across the sediment like living calligraphy, the jellyfish trailing silk threads beyond sight. We leave them where they belong, in the quiet, in the cold, in the slow, but we carry something with us as we rise from their world, a new understanding of how life can be. Antarctica as a teacher of contradictions. What makes Antarctica remarkable is not just its cold, or its isolation, or its age. It is the way those forces assemble contradictions that feel almost impossible. Fragile creatures that live centuries, delicate limbs that reach impossible lengths, ecosystems driven by scarcity, not abundance, giants sustained by microscopic dust, calm seas beneath raging winds, stability held together by ice that is always melting, beauty created by forces most life cannot endure. These contradictions form a single truth. Antarctica is a world shaped by balance, not balance in the human sense, not equilibrium or harmony, but a deeper, older balance found only in nature, a balance of cold and calm, of scarcity and bloom, of ancient time and slow adaptation, of isolation and interdependence. It is a balance easily broken, yet astonishingly durable when left untouched. And it is this balance that creates giants, a reminder of what life needs to thrive. As we step back from the edge of our journey, Antarctica leaves us with a quiet message. Life does not always flourish in warmth. Life does not always evolve in speed. Life does not always thrive in competition. Sometimes, life grows deepest roots and largest bodies in places where disturbance fades and time expands. When the world is gentle, fragility can survive. When the world is stable, slowness becomes strength. When the world endures, so does life. We live in a human age of acceleration, of noise, of disruption, of rapid change. Antarctica stands as a counterpoint, a reminder that slowness has value, that quiet holds power, that patience creates beauty impossible under pressure. The giants beneath the ice are proof. What the giants whisper. If we could hear the creatures we've met, not through sound, but through presence, what might they tell us? A sponge that has lived for 600 years might whisper, endurance is not passive, it is active resilience. A sea spider stretching delicate legs across the seafloor might whisper, fragility is not weakness, it is a different kind of strength. A ribbon worm drifting across sediment might whisper, growth is not a race, it is a long conversation with the environment. A jellyfish trailing tentacles into the blue might whisper, stillness can be vast, and perhaps the chorus of all Antarctic giants would say, listen, the world is quieter than you think, a final descent into memory. Before we leave Antarctica, imagine drifting down once more, just once, through the same crack in the sea ice we rose through earlier, down through cooling light, down past drifting algae, down past the first scattering of zooplankton, down past the shimmering bells of jellyfish, down into the deep twilight where shapes move like ideas forming, down into the quiet domain of the giants. Everything slows, everything softens, everything holds. The ocean here is patient. The creatures are patient. The continent is patient. This is not the patience of waiting. It is the patience of being. The patience of a world that has known calm for millions of years. The patience that created giants. The patience that still reigns beneath the frozen surface. We rise again slowly, gently knowing we will never see a world exactly like this again. A farewell written in ice and light. The journey ends where it began, at the boundary between water and sky. We stand once more beneath the pale sun, on the vast white plain. The wind picks up, the horizon glows, snow drifts in soft spirals, and below us, beneath meters of ice, continues an ancient world of quiet giants drifting through their long blue night. A world unchanged for millions of years. A world fragile to our touch. A world full of wonder. We leave it behind, but it does not leave us, because the story of Antarctica is a reminder of something we often forget. Life does not always need noise to be powerful. Life does not always need speed to be extraordinary. Life does not always need warmth to be full of wonder. Sometimes, life becomes greatest in silence. Sometimes, the world's most remarkable giants are the ones drifting beneath a frozen ceiling, moving slowly through the quiet. Antarctica is one such world. May we remember it gently.